Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of Haqiqatjou, where we discuss religion and politics, the two least controversial subjects. I'm your host, Daniel Haqiqatjou, and we have a great show prepared for you. I announced that this show took a month of research to prepare. A lot of work went into preparing for this episode, and I hope, inshaAllah, that it will serve as a resource for Muslim community for many years to come, bi'ithnillah. So may Allah accept. I hope that you will enjoy this episode. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find within the description of the video a link to MuslimSkeptic.com. And if you subscribe, you'll get exclusive updates that we don't share anywhere else on our social media channels, only through email. So make sure that you subscribe. But today, we're going to get into a lot of deep topics related to what? This issue of divorce, Islamic divorce. And we often talk about reform on this show and on MuslimSkeptic.com, for example, and in my debates, how there is this concerted effort to reform Islam. But there are not always examples that we can analyze in depth. And that's what we want to do today. But first, I want to share with you some messages I received. And I get messages like this all the time from brothers who are suffering. They are suffering and they feel like their lives have been destroyed. And some of them even start questioning Islam. They have these kinds of crises where even when they're practicing their whole lives, but they've been so broken by abuse and so broken by a system that seems to sabotage men at every turn, that they're having even a crisis in terms of their belief. So this is extremely serious. We have to talk about this as a community, and we have to get our facts right, because unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation that is being spread. I'm going to play some examples of the type of misinformation that unfortunately we see. Sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's not deliberate, it's accidental, but we want to clarify things once and for all. So let me get straight into this letter, because I think that you will be very shocked when you hear it. So these are the messages that I received from a Muslim brother. He says, "I've never been so oppressed in my entire life as much as I have been in the Muslim countries or in Sharia court. I got married to a Jordanian girl 2 years ago and registered the marriage through the Sharia courts. I made her sign a prenup saying that in case of divorce, we will divorce in America according to Islamic arbitration and not resort to non-Islamic law, so that I'm not wronged financially or denied the right to see my children. She was mentally ill. Her family is very troubled, but I've been patient. All kinds of problems have cropped up, from mental illness, suicide, zina, drugs, you name it. I tried to go to counseling with her, but she insisted that she's not crazy. Then she filed for divorce in Jordan, in the Sharia courts. I had already paid her the full mahar, which was $50,000, by the way. I also fully paid for the children. But despite giving her all her rights, I've been banned from travel for over 8 months and stuck in this country, Jordan, jobless. This is because the Sharia court here prevents me from leaving the country. So I've lost my job, which is in another country. All our marital conflicts were about petty things, like I requested that she don't go out with the kids past 10 p.m. at night. They're babies and should be home sleeping, but this is apparently controlling behavior. So now in Sharia court in Jordan, she's requesting khula, divorce. Khula. And the lawyers all tell me she has all the control. But what kind of khula is this? She won't have to pay me back the $50,000 mahar. She's taken custody of my kids despite her mental illnesses and all her financial issues. The prenup isn't acknowledged at all. She not only gets child support, but also alimony and a salary to take care of the kids, her own kids. I've given her full rights and been prevented my basic rights for my family, and I've been denied what's normal and decent. She's essentially further financially harmed me and prevented me from seeing my kids. She was so inept as a mother. She had a nanny that would come, clean, and babysit, and the kids were in daycare from 1 year old or less. We also lived on delivery food 85% of the time because she would refuse to cook. If I ever asked her for a cup of coffee, she actually said, "God gave you arms and legs to go make your own coffee." Wallahi, they have given women more rights than they're entitled to and destroyed any power men have to guide their families bil ma'ruf, in what is good. Am I a kafir for sincerely believing that and hating how these people practice Islam? What kind of Sharia is this that these Sharia courts are practicing? She gets custody of the kids till they're 12 or 13, and she can even drag it out until they're 16. She's filed divorce in this country where we're not even residents, but they are keeping me here to make sure I keep paying her. This is women's rights. Actually, she's filing for child support in 2 countries. I can't even see my kids anymore unless I fly around the world. She didn't get as much money as she wanted in the Sharia court, so she's actually switching to American courts as well. My wife would sometimes hit me when she got mad. She said, "Are you a man or a woman?" Complaining about a woman hitting you. So I started sleeping on the couch. But then one night she came and picked a fight with me after 2 or 3 days of sleeping on the couch. And I was very annoyed because she had been out late every night with the kids that week. So I pushed her away. She called the police. So I will continue reading, inshallah, the rest of the messages, but let's just stop here. And if you want to see or hear what happens to this brother, stay tuned for the whole episode, and at the end we'll discuss, or I'll share the rest of the story. But you can see how shocking this is, and you might think that this is just an anomaly, that this is something unheard of, and what Muslim would do this to another Muslim, let alone the father of her children. You might be thinking that this is just exaggerated, or that he is the one who's really at fault and he's just not sharing the full details. But the reality is that there are so many brothers, good Muslim brothers, pillars of the Muslim community who have suffered in similar ways or even worse ways. And they're sending their messages to me, and sometimes they post on social media. And this is quite a crisis. But what's causing this? What is causing this kind of abuse and dhulm, injustice against Muslim men, and injustice against children, and injustice against all of society? Because if the marital bond breaks down and families are destroyed, then all of the ummah will suffer. We have to understand what are the causes of this. And that's why we have this series for the Haqiqatjou that we're starting just today, taking a deeper dive into the causes of what is destroying Muslim marriage and what kind of reforms are being pushed under the guise of Islamic tradition that are causing so many problems. We're going to take a look at this and start the series, inshallah, today by looking at this concept of khula. And this is sometimes mistranslated as women's divorce or a wife's right to divorce. Is this really something that is in Islam? Do women have the right to divorce? we want to look at this more closely. But before we get into that, I want to share with you this clip. And let's see what one very respectable Sheikh Asim al-Hakim says in one of his answers. He offers different answers on his YouTube channel. And this one is pertaining to khula. So let's listen to it. Let me just bring it up. By the way, if you want to contribute super chats, you can do that, and we'll read them later in the episode, inshallah. Later.
The next question is from Sister Nargis. I'm an American revert to Islam, alhamdulillah. After 5 years of non-support and separation, a Pakistani Sharia family court granted me a khula. My husband is a Pakistani Afghan, and he claims it is not valid divorce since he does not accept the court's decision. What should I do? I'm remarried now in the US and want peace of mind, inshallah.
As long as it's a Sharia court that granted you khul', whether he's happy with it or not, tough bananas. He has nothing to do with you anymore. Is not related to you. The Sharia court has the power to separate a man from his wife, and a woman from her husband. This is why it's a Sharia court. And if your husband is someone who doesn't fear Allah, so you ask him for divorce and he doesn't want to divorce you. You say, take the mahar and give me khul'. He says, I don't want to give you khul'. What do you want then? I want to live with you. I don't want to live with you. What the heck?
So you understand the scenario. The wife wants a separation. She wants khula, and the husband says no.
What is happening? You're not a real man. You're abusive. You're oppressive. Even if you're the kindest Don Juan, even if you are Casanova, I hate your guts. I don't want to be with you. It's not by force. So
in this example, he's Casanova, he's Don Juan, he's a romantic, great husband, but she just doesn't want to be married.
He has no right to refuse, and if a Sharia court looks into it and gives a verdict, then you are having a valid khul', and your marriage with your second husband is legit. Cut all communications with him unless you have children. In this case, let someone else communicate with him, and Allah knows best.
Okay, so he says that you have no right the husband has no right to prevent that khula, prevent that divorce if she requests it. And it doesn't matter. He can be, Don Juan. He's meeting all her needs and her rights Islamically. It doesn't matter. His consent is irrelevant. He has no right to prevent it. And in fact, he's calling it abusive, or are you even a man? So what is the status of what we just heard? Does this have a basis in the Sharia? Does this have a basis in the Islamic tradition or in the Quran and Sunnah? This is what we want to investigate and see how things have evolved over time. The evolution of fiqh, so-called. How have things really changed in the modern period compared to the traditional history, 1400 years or 1300 years or 1200 years of Islam? How have things been updated? So let me share some of these slides, inshallah, because there's just so much information that I want you to have as a reference. You can take notes, and we're going to actually publish all of these notes and make a kind of an ebook. It's about 50 or more pages at this point, and all the references. So you'll have that, and you'll be able to download it, inshallah. It's going to require signing up for our newsletter, of course, so you might as well do that now. But this is going to be a resource for the community, bi'idhnillah. So let me just bring it up. Okay. So this is the key question. Does Islam permit a wife to obtain a divorce without her husband's consent? Is this something that we find within Islam? What we heard from Asim al-Hakeem, Sheikh Asim, is he's saying, yes, of course, she has, if she wants it, he has to give it to her, and he has no right as the husband to refuse. Is this the case? So this falls under the broader topic of reform of Islamic marriage that we've seen in the modern period. And these are all areas where Islamic law is being reformed, not only when it comes to divorce law, but also when it comes to laws on nushuz and domestic violence, new laws on minimum marriage age, new laws on asset division and community property, new laws on child support, polygyny, and marriage registration. So these are things that are all in the process of being reformed. And in future episodes, we're going to look closer at each one of these, inshaAllah. So to understand what is happening with this evolution, we have to understand the concept of no-fault divorce. What is no-fault divorce? Maybe you've heard of this term. It's basically when a husband or wife can end the marriage for any reason, at will, for any reason that they have. It could even be, I'm just not happy anymore. I just don't like him for whatever reason. That is legitimate, considered legitimate, and the divorce can be granted just by that. So many modern Muslims, including many religious scholars, believe that Islam accepts something like a general no-fault divorce. And I'm shocked to, when I'm confronted, or I'll mention the fact that, well, no-fault divorce is a problem, and this is something that we don't really have in Islam. And people are shocked. Muslims are shocked. Even imams are shocked when they hear this, because all they have heard is basically a kind of equality arrangement, equality marriage, that just like the husband has the right to divorce through talaq, the woman has an equal right to issue divorce through khul. As we'll see, this is mistaken. So divorce in other religions, just as a quick comparison, in Hinduism, the husband cannot divorce the wife and she can't divorce him. And even after the husband dies, the wife is supposed to be celibate. She cannot remarry. She's still bound by the same marital contract with her deceased husband. And ideally, she's encouraged to do sati, the funeral pyre, burn herself to death. That is her choice, but she's encouraged to do that within Hinduism. In Christianity, you might not know this, but Jesus has very strong words against divorce, or what they claim is Jesus. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 through 32, Jesus states, "It was also said that whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So this is quite severe. That if you divorce your wife for any reason except that she committed some kind of unchaste act, then you are committing adultery. And if you remarry, then that's also adultery. So there's a strict prohibition in Christianity of divorce, and you might be familiar with this because of pop culture. Till death do us part, the wedding vows. It's supposed to be a contract that lasts, a holy matrimony that lasts for the rest of your lives. And it's interesting because within pre-modern history, Christians would criticize Islam for being lax when it came to divorce. And ironically, according to these Christians, Muslims were too lustful, and because they have the ability to divorce and remarry. So it's interesting how tables have turned. Now they criticize Muslims for being too conservative and to being kind of prudish. But this is not how it was historically. And in fact, there's this famous example of the Byzantine Emperor Leo III writing a letter to Omar Abdulaziz the Umayyad Caliph, where he raises these issues. He says, and you, when you're satisfied with your wives as if with food, then you want to leave them and you leave them. So this was the Christian criticism of Islam, that we have divorce. So beginning in the 18th century, you have this European Enlightenment. And as we've discussed many times, the whole point of the Enlightenment is to maximize individual freedom, maximize equality, and this is under the heading of human rights. We want to increase human rights and establish it around the world. And religion was seen as a big obstacle to this project, especially traditional religion. So traditional religion has to be destroyed. Ideally, people become atheists, but lesser than that, if we can't get them to just abandon religion altogether, it's fine if they adopt some kind of reformed religion, like a modernized, liberalized religion. So this led to the reform of religions like Christianity. And here's a list of Protestant reformers like John Locke, Pierre Bayle, William Warburton, and Johann Semler. And you also had Catholic reformers like Joseph Abel, Antoine Lemairet, and Henry Gregor. This is within Christianity, but you also had the same thing within all of the world's major religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and Islam. So when it came to pre-modern divorce, you have what's called a fault divorce. Fault as opposed to no fault. When it comes to fault divorce, the church, for example, would issue a limited form of divorce having to do with fault on behalf of a person. So if someone commits adultery, that can be grounds for divorce, as we read in Matthew in the Bible. Also heresy, if the spouse commits heresy, that could be a grounds for divorce according to the church. But this involves declaring one person at fault. There's one person who committed adultery. There's one person in the marriage that committed heresy. So that person is at fault, and that comes with consequences, whether it's a legal punishment, it's social stigma, there's loss of property, loss of child custody rights, etc. This is fault divorce. But then this started to change. This was reformed post-Enlightenment, starting in the mid-18th century in the countries of Prussia and France in particular, where the authority of the church is being evacuated and given to the secular state. So the secular state starts managing family law according to liberalism and granting increased individual freedom and equality. So it became increasingly easy to get a divorce based on unhappiness and not assigning fault. Because if you assign fault, then this decreases from equality, decreases from freedom rather, because a person is worried about the fault that's going to be assigned, and therefore he or she is not going to try to exit the marriage. This is a kind of coercion that's contrary to liberal ideals of freedom and individual freedom to choose. Therefore, you have to take away the stigma, you have to take away the fault. Just because you are not satisfied, you choose not to be in the marriage, that is acceptable. So this reform started to happen in the mid-18th century, but the change was slow because there's still this Christian society, Christian Europe, who is being liberalized, but there's still this kind of social stigma with divorce. The full reform and the complete introduction of no-fault divorce came between 1960s and 1970s. The U.S. and other Western countries adopted this no-fault divorce into the law, and it's seen as a fundamental human right. Again, you have to be able to choose. If you don't want to be in a marriage anymore, you shouldn't be forced to do so just because you made an agreement, just because you signed vows, or just because this is what contradicts the traditional religions. Traditionally, the marriage is a contract. You agree and you make a commitment, and just like you make any other contract, like a sales contract or an employment contract, where you agree that, okay, I'm going to sell you this car and you give me this money and we complete the transaction. The whole point of a sales contract or an employment contract is you consent at the beginning of the agreement, but you can't renege in the middle of the agreement, or you cannot go back on your word. That is breach of contract. And if you breach the contract, then there are consequences. There is fault. But for some reason, according to the liberal mind, this is unacceptable. Like, if it's truly the case that the marriage contract is coercive, then every contract should be considered coercive. Every contract that you make, sales contract, employment contract, contracts that have to do with inheritance, contracts that have to do with any kind of issue that you can think of, that's also should be considered coercive, because you have to abide by the contract after it's signed. Why doesn't liberalism dissolve all of these kinds of contracts in the name of individual freedom and equality? For now, they have just focused on family, marriage, and any kind of contract that has to do with traditional religion. So the consequences of the proliferation of no-fault divorce: you've undermined marriage and family for reasons that we're going to get into. There's been a huge drop in the marriage rates. There is a huge rise in fornication. There's rise in having children out of wedlock, where over half of all children are born out of wedlock without two committed parents. This is a human disaster that has hit the West since the 1960s and the so-called sexual revolution. And we, can see why. When you have this no-fault divorce, you make it very easy for people to leave their commitments and their marriage contracts, then people won't get married, because as soon as the marriage hits bumpy times, as soon as there is some kind of difficulty or some kind of argument, you're going to be less inclined to try to resolve that or weather the storm. You want to just exit because it's much easier to do. So you exit. There's no fault. In the case of women, you get all of these incentives to actually leave the marriage because you're entitled to half of your husband's property. You're going to get custody of the kids. You're also going to face all kinds of social celebration, because exiting an abusive marriage results in being praised as a brave, independent woman, and you don't need no man, right? And every marriage is basically abusive at this point. According to these feminist standards, every marriage can be portrayed as being abusive, because the definition of abuse has expanded so far. You have, physical abuse, but then there's emotional abuse, there's psychological abuse, there's financial abuse, and on and on. The definition of abuse continues to expand and expand as feminists find more ways to understand how traditional institutions and gender roles like marriage and family are constraining of individual freedom. So this is to liberate the individual, whether it's a woman or a man or any of the other genders that exist. To truly liberate people, you have to identify all of the ways that they're being abused so that we can eliminate abuse forever. This is the liberal project. So let's look at some of these stats. This is from the Washington Post, which the graph is, but the actual data is from the CDC and the NCHS. Over 144 years of marriage and divorce in the U.S. You see, so the blue is marriage. You see that it's dropping. People sometimes will just look at the orange line and say, oh, see, divorce is dropping. Well, that's because the overall share of marriage, there's fewer and fewer people who are married. So that's why divorces actually will seem like it's decreasing in absolute terms. But in relative terms, it's increasing. This chart clearly demonstrates that. But you see in the 1960s and 70s, there's this huge jump in divorce. You see other periods too where there is more divorce, but it's a gradual increase over time. Starting from the mid-19th century. This is pure enlightenment, dissolving of marriage. Percentage of midlife never married adults. So the share of adults who don't ever get married by the time they're in their 50s, I believe. This is from the U.S. Census Bureau. This is increasing at an alarming rate. 29% of adults, by the time they're 50, they're not going to be married, or they're not married, and likely they will never get married. So this number just keeps going up higher at a steady pace. What is causing this? People don't want to get married. Why get married when your life could potentially very easily be destroyed, because one party can very easily exit for whatever reason and rip your family apart. Imagine. So let's look at Islam now. So in Islam, marriage is a private contract or an aqd between two parties. The first party is the husband. The second party is the wife and her family. And her family is represented by her wali or her guardian, which is usually her father, but it can also be her grandfather or her uncle, paternal uncle. The parties make the contract privately in the same way they may make other types of contracts like business contracts, partnerships, employment, etc. They do not need to go to any state court. They do not need to go to any kind of masjid or imam to have the contract approved or blessed. This is just a contract between those two parties. And there are certain requirements, like for a mahar, like a bridal gift. That's a requirement that the husband has to give to the wife. Also, the need for witnesses, two witnesses, male witnesses. So these are details that we won't get into, but the point is that it's a private contract. So what does the contract entail? Like, what are the terms of this contract? Well, this is just the bare bones, but the husband is going to be the protector. He's the provider. He provides maintenance for his wife and any children that are produced. This is called nafaqah. And he also has authority, qawama, as the husband. So he is the head of the household. He pays the mahar. And when it comes to paying the mahar, sometimes it's just paid all up front. It's a mutually agreed on amount. It can be any gift or amount of money. In the messages that we read, this poor brother paid 50,000 USD as a mahar. And then sometimes there's like a initial payment and then a delayed payment. So like you pay 50% of the mahar up front and then 50% later. And that becomes relevant if there is ever a divorce. If he issues a divorce, then he has to pay the remainder of the mahar. So imagine I want to marry someone. We agree to $10,000 mahar. I say, okay, $5,000 initially and then $5,000 later. Mu'akhar is what it's called, like the delayed amount. And then the delayed amount, that serves as a kind of disincentive for me to divorce, because if I divorce, then that's when that $5,000 is going to be due, and I have to pay it. I can't divorce without having completed payment. So this is mahar. So in return for the husband's protection and provision, the wife offers her husband intimacy and agrees to bear his children. She's also obliged to acknowledge him as head of the family and obey him. And this is called ta'a, very important. So we read in the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, and until the rest of the verse. بما بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Okay, so what he pays out of, what they pay out of their wealth. So the translation, men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend, meaning for maintenance, anfaqu, which is nafaqah, the term, from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, and so the term is nushuz, advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them lightly. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. So this is the basis of patriarchy in Islam. This is the basis of the authority of the husband in Islam. This also sets the gender roles. The man, الرجال قوامون على النساء, means that he is the qawam, refers to primarily the authority. He's also a protector. He's also a provider. He's ultimately responsible for that household. And then she owes him obedience. So beyond what the Quran says, we also know that male leadership is biological. And we've discussed this term hypergamy many, many times on this channel. Women find men with power more attractive, whether this power pertains to the physical body in terms of being taller or having more muscles, or the power that comes with large amounts of wealth and prestige or status. Women are naturally attracted to powerful men who can provide and protect them and their children. So it's not only that Islam is prescribing patriarchy. Patriarchy is also what women themselves prefer biologically. And unfortunately, feminism and liberalism has caused this false consciousness where women think that they want equality in a marriage, but their bodies are telling them actually that, no, I want to be a submissive wife. This is just what is natural to women. So if you're an atheist and you believe in evolution, there's an evolutionary explanation for why women are like this. They want to be submissive. They want to have a leader who is bigger and stronger than they are, and they want to follow him. And if you are not an evolutionist, which I'm not, you understand and know that this is how God has created human beings, how God has created men and women. So male leadership is Islamic, and this is a hadith that we find in Abu Dawood. It's a Sahih hadith. Every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for his flock. The leader of people is a guardian and is responsible for his subjects. A man is the guardian of his family and is responsible for them. A woman is the guardian of her husband's home and his children, and she is responsible for them. So this, again, hadith very clearly lays out the gender roles within Islam. What Islam is prescribing is a kind of benevolent masculine leadership. So other hadith that we can read. The Prophet ﷺ said, the most perfect of the believers in faith is the best of them in attitude, and the best of you are those who are best in attitude towards your wives or toward their wives. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, I urge you to be kind to women. So that's benevolent masculine leadership. And then you have agreeable feminine followership. And this is a quote coming from Ibn al-Jawzi in his famous work Talbis Iblis, The Deception of Satan. And Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, has this great statement. He says, maybe he's talking about marital discord, marital problems. Maybe she, the wife, will live with her husband in an evil manner. She may speak to him with that which is haram, and she will say, this is the father of my children, and that's all that's between us. And she will leave the house without his permission. And she says, I didn't go out to sin. Well, she doesn't know that leaving the house without his permission is a sin in and of itself. A lot of Muslim women don't know this. Like, did you know that you can't leave your husband's house without his permission? And as soon as you agree to marry him, you have agreed to this part of Islam. It is haram for you, forbidden. If you leave the house without his permission, you have sinned, and you have sinned against his rights. And Ibn al-Jawzi is mentioning this. Continuing, from them are those whom their husbands call to the bed, and they refuse, thinking that this refusal is not a sin, while she is forbidden to do so. Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, if the man calls his woman to the bed and she refuses, and she spends the night while he is angry with her, the angels curse her until she reaches the morning. So again, this is something that we know, the famous hadith, that if she refuses intimacy, well, that's part of the marital contract. Now, there could be a legitimate excuse, like maybe she's sick, or maybe she's really in a bad state in terms of physically sick, then that's a legitimate excuse. But if she uses this as a weapon, if she uses this as a way to manipulate her husband, she just says no because she's angry or something like that, then this is something that is very bad in Islam. And the angels will actually curse her till morning because of what she has done. This is a major sin. And just imagine if a husband says, oh, well, I'm not going to pay your nafaqah this month. I'm not going to pay pay the rent this month because I just don't feel like it. And he uses that as a tool for manipulation. This is also a violation of the marriage contract. The contract is you're mutually agreed, and you have to meet the requirements of the contract. You've committed to it. And if you don't, then it's Allah who is underwriting or undersigning that contract. If you violate it, then you are going to be sinful. So continuing with the quote, she will spend carelessly out of the wealth of her husband, and it's not allowed for her to take anything out of the house except with his permission, or except if she knows he will be pleased with that. So this completely destroys this false understanding that, oh, my money is my money, but his money is also my money. This is what some Muslim women unfortunately think. They've been misled. No, his money is his money, and you don't have any entitlement to that money except what you what's required for your upkeep. the nafaqah, the maintenance. Other than that, no, his money is not your money. So this, I think, is a very nice quote because it encapsulates so many of the different aspects of Islamic law and the requirements of marriage that some Muslim women are just simply ignorant of. Okay, let's go to the next. So this is a statement, the most hated permitted thing before Allah is divorce, that is sometimes attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the most hated permitted thing before Allah is divorce. So we get to the topic, and sometimes divorce could be necessary. Sometimes divorce is better. Someone opts for divorce. That is permissible in Islam, but it's something that you should strive to avoid as much as possible. So there are three types of divorce in Islam. There's just the standard talaq, then there's tafriq, or sometimes it's called fasq, and then there's khul. And we're going to talk about all three types, inshaAllah, and explain, what are they? Is any of this like women or wife's right to divorce? We'll see. Islam makes it easier for husbands to divorce than wives. Underlying wisdoms of this we'll explain. So this is contrary to equality. Women do not have the same right to divorce their husbands as husbands have the right to divorce their wives in Islam. And this is often cited as, well, this shows that Islam is misogynistic, Islam is backwards, and some Muslims and some imams, unfortunately, are very self-conscious about this, and they're embarrassed about this, unfortunately, and they try to hide it, or they try to distort this and try to portray Islam as, no, there's equal right to divorce. And women, just like a man has a right to divorce, so does the woman. But as we'll see, there's no real basis for this. So first, talaq. A husband can divorce by saying, you are divorced. Anti talaq. That is all it requires. It doesn't require a judge. It doesn't require witnesses. It doesn't require like actual registration, or going before like a Sharia panel or Sharia court, Islamic council. No, that's all that's required. And then when he issues that, then there's a waiting period known as the iddah, and it's roughly 3 months or 3 cycles, cycles of the period. And in that iddah period, they have the opportunity to reconcile. Basically, he can take her back. If no reconciliation is reached by the end of the iddah, then the husband loses the mahar, as we mentioned before. He doesn't have to pay nafaqah anymore, and he does have to pay child support. But point number 4, they're not entitled to each other's property. So this is very different than divorce court in the West. It's very different than the division of property according to feminist laws that have been established, where a wife can say, well, I was at home taking care of his kids. He was working. I'm entitled to everything, all the money he made over the past 10 years. I'm entitled to half of it, to 50% of it. And everything that he bought. He bought us a house. I'm entitled to half. He bought cars. I'm entitled to half of that. He bought whatever. I am entitled to half, and the court will grant her that. And sometimes the court will grant her even alimony in addition to child support. So this is like nafaqah after the divorce. So imagine like you get divorced and you demand that, okay, we're divorced, but I still get sexual access to you and you have to be sexually available to me. Like people would say that, well, that's stupid. You're divorced. Well, if that's stupid, then how is she entitled to maintenance and money, alimony after we've split up? So, but that's what feminism requires. So why can a husband give divorce but not the wife? So what's the wisdom of this? Well, first of all, a husband already has a built-in financial disincentive to avoid pronouncing the talaq. He's going to lose the mahar. He's going to lose the bridal gift that he gave, whatever that may be. And the wife has no disincentive. If she was given the right to divorce whenever she wanted in an equal measure, she could just announce divorce immediately after, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. Okay, I divorce you, Bilal. I divorce you, Muhammad. I'm going to take this mahar, and then she can get married again and collect another bridal gift, collect another mahar, and she can make a business out of it. And this actually exists, in Iran and other Middle Eastern countries. You hear about this because of increasing women's rights and increasing right to divorce. Women are now taking advantage of this, and they're making a business out of, okay, they're demanding exorbitant mahar. You have to give me 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, and an apartment, and have it fully furnished. So they get all of that, and then they go and claim that they're abused, and they get the divorce, the khula, quote unquote khula from the Sharia court. So they didn't have an apartment before. Now they have the apartment. Now they have a fully furnished apartment, and they can, this is how some women are climbing the social ladder. Is misusing this concept of khula, of women's divorce, which we're going to describe in a second. So, but the husband doesn't have the same kind of incentive. He pays the mahar. If he divorces her, then he loses that mahar. If he wants to get married again, he has to pay another mahar. And typically, if he's paid a certain amount before, then it's the expectation that he's going to pay a similar amount for the next one. And sometimes families talk, and it's known, okay, this is how much he gave his first wife. He's not going to start being stingy with the second wife, after he's been divorced. So this is a big disincentive. Like, husbands generally, unless there's a real reason where his life is being negatively affected, or the children are being negatively affected, there's like a big problem, he's going to generally try to avoid divorce. And of course, there are exceptions to everything. But there's a built-in disincentive with the mahar. So the second big reason why women are not given the right to divorce is that the husband has this kind of authority. And we read in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, verse 34, الرجال قوامون على النساء. That authority that the husband has is completely undermined if she can just leave the marriage whenever she wants. Okay, you're trying to, imagine a wife who starts doing drugs. Imagine a wife, and this is actually in the messages that we read. She is doing things that are very damaging to the family. She is not properly taking care of children. She's taking advantage of the situation. It's becoming a very volatile situation. And he, as a husband, has no authority, no right to do anything to rectify the situation. So how can that be a marriage that continues? There is no possibility of marriage. And it's because she knows that, okay, you start with me, and I'm going to just get a divorce, and I'm going to bleed you dry. I have the right to do that. I'm going to the Sharia court, and the Sharia court, quote unquote, is giving me the right to just exit. So this right to divorce fundamentally undermines any kind of authority that a husband has, if it were the case that women had the right to divorce in Islam. The thing is that they don't. And that's one of the main reasons why. The third reason that women do not have an equal right to divorce is that Islam understands men and women to be different psychologically. Women have this beautiful quality of being very loving and caring, and this is why they have custody of younger children. They're good with children. They're good with taking care of family. This kind of domestic sphere. They're psychologically created for that. Men, on the other hand, they have other qualities. They're more bold, daring, brave. They have this sense of, I can sacrifice, or I will sacrifice for my family. I will do what's necessary, even if it's difficult, because I love my wife, I love my children. And this is why Islam has given different roles to the genders based on how Allah has created men and women differently. Women stay at home. They take care of children. They take care of domestic responsibilities. As we read in that hadith about kullukum ra'in, all of you are shepherds responsible for your flock. Women are responsible for their households. The men are responsible for things like jihad. Men are responsible for things like bringing food and putting food on the table. Or as George Bush putting food on your family, if you remember that gaffe from George W. Bush. But this is the difference between men and women. Islam also holds, more controversially, that women have less power of reason. Their aql is there is naqs in it, or there naqisat al-aqlin wa dinin, as the famous hadith says, that I will read in a second. So women have less common sense. Women have less reason. Why? Because they can be more emotional. And this is something that is mentioned in the Sunnah. And it is also referred to, it's implied actually in the Quran, and it's also mentioned over and over and over again by the ulama and the scholars of Islam. So the famous hadith that this is based off of, which is a very, very important hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ went past a group of women, and he told them, you should give charity and ask for a lot of forgiveness, because I saw you in bulk amongst the dwellers of hell. Meaning you're the majority in the hellfire, women. A wise lady among them said, why is it, O Messenger of Allah, that women folk are the majority in hell? Upon this, the Prophet ﷺ observed, you curse too much and are ungrateful to your spouses, meaning your husbands. I have seen none lacking in common sense or aql and failing in religion, but at the same time robbing the wisdom of the wise besides you. So a lot of Muslim women feel offended, or they feel confused by this hadith. Like, is the Prophet ﷺ insulting us? But actually, it's a kind of praise of women, because it's saying that you're lacking in these ways compared to men, but you can bring a man to his knees with the other qualities that you have. But, the Prophet ﷺ is specifically mentioning that men and women are different. And when it comes to aql, specifically, there is a deficiency when it comes to women. And we'll look at this more closely. So continuing the hadith, upon this the women remark, what is wrong with our common sense and with religion? And the Prophet ﷺ observed, your lack of common sense can be judged by the fact that the evidence of 2 women is equal to 1 man. So when it comes to testimony, that's proof of the lack or the naqs in the aql. And you spend some nights and days in which you do not offer prayer, and in the month of Ramadan, during the days you do not observe the fast. That is the deficiency in religion. I don't like the translation too much. I don't know why I pasted it if I didn't like this translation. So this is a sahih hadith. And this is a very important hadith that needs to be taught and needs to be shared. If the Prophet ﷺ said it, it's important, and women need to take it to heart. This is very applicable to the behavior of some women today. Do they not fear that they're part of this majority that the Prophet ﷺ is referring to? And he's saying this, and he's advising women who are the Sahabiyat. They're the best generation of women. And he's addressing them directly. So imagine imagine me living in this time, far away from the Prophet ﷺ, far away from righteousness. How much more in need are women today of asking forgiveness, of being grateful to their spouses? This is very critical. We have to be teaching this hadith. If you have any kind of Islamic school and you have girls in that Islamic school, teach them this hadith. If you have daughters, teach them this hadith. If you have sisters, teach them this hadith. We need to. This hadith has the antidote to feminism. Then why aren't we sharing this and teaching this? And why are some people embarrassed about this? You're embarrassed about the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you have no shame? So deficiency. So this, when the Prophet ﷺ calls women naqisat aqlin wa dinin, in Arabic, deficient in aql, what does that mean? So some Islamic scholars said women have weakness in recalling information, especially in emotional situations, and that's why their testimony is less than a man's testimony, because emotionality can cloud their judgment. Most ulama, most scholars of the Islamic tradition said that this deficiency in aql, in reason or common sense, is due to women being more emotional and making bad decisions because of that. So it's interesting that this kind of understanding of women vis-a-vis men is shared in a lot of cultures. very noteworthy ones are the ancient Greco-Roman culture, the Christian culture throughout history also share this exact same idea. And of course, Islamic cultures, that women are more emotional. And sometimes the term that is used, it's kind of a medicalized term, is hysteria. That women suffer from hysteria, and it's known as a disorder involving out-of-control emotions associated primarily or exclusively with women. And within the West, ideas about hysteria were common among medical professionals into the early 20th century, but then it was kind of seen as outmoded or misogynistic, and it was abandoned. But as we'll see, like, maybe it shouldn't have been abandoned. It wasn't really disproven when we actually look at the statistics. But this was one reason that no-fault divorce wasn't accepted, even in the West. Why? Because women suffer from hysteria. So if we give them the power to just divorce at will without any consequence, then all marriages will break down because hysteria is such a common problem. It's a mental or psychological problem that women suffer from. This was the understanding within the West. So it's interesting parallel when we look at Islamic culture and other, even Eastern cultures. They share this kind of idea of women. But what does the science say? What does the scientific evidence say? Does the science say that women are crazy? Women are nuts. Am I right? Right. So this might sound misogynistic. It might sound like, okay, we're just making light, but this is a reality. There's a lot of scientific literature actually about women being more emotional than men, and they're more inclined to make automatic emotion-based decisions regardless of the negative consequences. Their judgment can get clouded because of emotionality. So this isn't just some kind of old misogynistic idea that has no basis in reality. And I went to college and there were plenty of very capable women, even more capable than men. So how can they be less than men in intelligence or reason? Like this kind of stupid response that you see from liberals or modernists. No, let's look at the actual scientific data and we'll see a very significant difference between men and women when it comes to these psychological factors and personality traits. These behavioral patterns are reflected in situations where women are under stress and more readily exhibit behaviors like crying and fear. So you put subjects in the stressful position and you see how they make basic decision making and how men and women will react differently given that stress. So here are two studies that you can look at: gender differences in emotional responses, a psychophysiological study. This was published in 2012. And then gender differences in emotion regulation, an fMRI study of cognitive reappraisal. This was published in 2008. And it's showing the emotionality that can cloud the decision-making of women vis-a-vis men. You also have this other paper, chapter, Affective Disorders and Gender Differences. This was published in 2019. Psychopathology in Women. This is a book that was published in 2019. So the science is very clear. Like when it comes to men and women, they have big differences in terms of their ability to make decisions. That's what rationality is. Like to be a rational person, you have to make decisions in a cold and calculated way. But women are deficient compared to men in this practice or in terms of this ability. So this is, I think we can understand this as perhaps being what the Prophet ﷺ is referring to. Because when you're in an emotional situation in your marriage, can you really make the best decision? This is why the husband has the authority. He is placed in that position of leadership, and ultimately he has the responsibility. Cooler heads will prevail, and that is what his gender role is based off of. It comes down to biological differences, the way that Allah has created men versus women. So mental illness in women, this is something that's shocking. I was shocked when I read these stats. In 2022, it's estimated that around 41% of women in the U.S. aged 26 to 29 suffer from some mental illness, and 11% of those in this age group suffered from serious mental illness. So mental illness, however that's defined according to the West, is very serious, widespread problem. So you can see this chart that's showing the distribution. This is on the x-axis is by age. So 18 to 20 years all the way to 65 years and older. You see that there is, in the age 21 to 25 age group, 43%, almost 44% of women suffer from some kind of mental illness, and 15% from a serious mental illness. And when 21 to 25 years, that's like typically when Muslim women are getting married nowadays. 26 to 29, so there's a very high chance, if you're a Muslim man who's recently got married, it's 50-50 that you have a spouse that may suffer from some kind of mental illness, potentially serious. Here's another data point or graph. What share of people have depression in their lifetimes? So this is also looking at the U.S. You can see that the rates of depression for women are just much higher than men. And again, this goes to emotionality that women have compared to men. And the data takes into account the fact that men might not report this of themselves as much as women. So they take into account that factor as well. And it's still, when it comes to women, really high levels of mental illness, depression. So, the previous centuries where they're talking about hysteria, that really hasn't been disproven. It seems like they were talking about a real phenomenon. Like there seems to be a lot of emotionality coming from women compared to men. That is a real phenomenon, but now various psychological studies, sociological studies have shown that, women are suffering more from these types of issues disproportionately. They're affected by depression, bipolar. This is a huge issue. Anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress, eating disorders. All of that might have been labeled in the past as hysteria. But now it's like a more nuanced detail, like, okay, there's this issue, there's this issue, there's this issue, and women are disproportionately affected compared to men. So this is something like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahu Alam, but it seems like he's referring to this kind of psychology of the female mind. So given this kind of information, what would be the result of giving women the right to pronounce divorce whenever she feels like it, in the same way that men have that right? So in marriage, you're inevitably going to hit times of stress, times of problems. There's going to be really high emotions. And in that situation, her judgment can get clouded, and then she pronounces talaq, she pronounces divorce. That ends the marriage, that ends the family. It would harm her, it would harm her husband, it would harm the children, and ultimately it harms society at large. This is a disaster, and this is exactly why women are not given this right, for all of the reasons that we've mentioned. So when we have no-fault divorce proliferate, 70% of divorces in the US are initiated by women. And if you look at college-educated women, that number goes to 90%. 90% of divorces in the US are initiated by women. So that's a huge proportion. Why do you think that is? If men and women are equal and exactly, in terms of their understanding, their psychology, their aql, their reason, why is it? Are women being incentivized? Is it that women are more emotional? Like what explains this kind of discrepancy? And the feminists will try to say, oh, well, there's structural misogyny, or they'll give some kind of goofy explanation. But the reality is that this is something biological. This is something biological. It's something that, speaks to the fact that men, when they've made the commitment to a woman and they've put in resources, in terms of financial resources, time, attention, emotional energy. It's not easy for men to be emotionally invested in someone. That is a lot of value that they don't want to just lose. So they're disincentivized to break things off within the marriage context. But women don't have the same skin in the game. To be frank, they don't have the same skin in the game, and they feel like they can find other people. They can find someone better. This is hypergamy that will kick in, especially in a society where there's just gender mixing. Women and men are just mixing with each other. So just like a man's eyes naturally will roam, a woman's eyes also roams, and she sees men who have higher status than her husband and who might be taller, in better shape, who might have more muscles, more money, better car. And then she develops this attraction and thinks that she can just exit the marriage. And she, with no fault divorce, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So we have this shocking reality in the West where women will even divorce the most successful men. Here you have some of the best athletes and actors, the most attractive men physically in the world, and their wives will leave them and will claim that they abuse them, claims that don't pan out. Johnny Depp is the most infamous case where his ex-wife claimed that he was abusing her, and it turned out all to be a lie because of things that he had recorded and proved in court. So how, these women these wives that are divorcing the likes of Johnny Depp, Brad Pitt, Tom Brady, etc., like who's that other guy? Will Smith. These top actors, the most handsome men, fit, rich, wealthy, like they think they're gonna get better. Like they think they can find a husband who's better than what they have. Like that's the kind of delusion that unfortunately a lot of women are being trained to suffer from because of feminism, because of the culture, because of this idea, oh, you're worth it, and you're so strong and beautiful and amazing, and you deserve so much, and he's not treating you well enough, and he's not really giving you all that you deserve. He's a lowlife, he's a deadbeat, leave him. That's the kind of message that women are trained to, or the script that they're trained to recite to each other constantly. So this is why 70% of the divorces are initiated by them. Even the rich, the richest men, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, their wives are not satisfied. Their wives have left them, divorced them. It's not clear that they wanted to have this divorce. They most likely didn't want to be divorced from their wives. Again, there's a lot of investment. There's a disincentive to leave the wife that you've spent so much of your years already with. So most desirable men are readily divorced by their wives in this kind of no-fault divorce dystopia that we live in. And it's still not enough. Courts keep giving more freedom to the female population, a female population, by the way, that's suffering from mental issues. And there's these strange principles that are being pushed as well, like believe all women, like the Me Too movement. We have to believe all women. So the result is that the courts are automatically giving these divorces, assigning no fault, basically incentivizing women to leave their husbands so they can extract as much wealth as possible from those husbands. And whatever they claim in court, whatever these women are claiming in court, like, oh, he abused me, he was beating me with a tire iron, like, oh, there was all this rape involved as well, like anything that they claim, oh, believe all women. You got to believe it. Otherwise you're a misogynist. Otherwise you hate women if you don't believe them. So this is creating this complete dystopia where marriages are dissolving and there's no relief in sight. It's like a long, moonless night, and we don't know when the dawn is going to come. It's very sad. So what is the solution? Well, Islam is the solution, we know. We know that Islam, the wisdom of the Creator, doesn't allow this kind of no-fault divorce. So men are encouraged not to expect women to be emotionally stable. Rather, men must be patient. They must be tolerant. They must be merciful. They must be kind. At the same time, given that women are not the same as men psychologically, emotionally, it makes absolutely no sense to give them the same rights as men, such as the right to divorce, initiate the divorce. It doesn't make sense to give women this right. doesn't make sense. And we see it's not like it's a theoretical, okay, if we give them the right, what's going to happen? Bad things are going to happen. Maybe, theoretically, hypothetically. We don't have to have theory. We see the reality. This experiment of giving women the right to divorce, we're seeing it play out in society at large. And it's also spreading, unfortunately, to the Muslim world. You know, the so-called Sharia courts in countries like Jordan or wherever in the Middle East or in Africa or Asia, they're adopting the same kind of principles, the same kind of feminist principles. In some cases, they're being forced by international human rights law to adopt these principles. And this, gives lie to the claim that, oh, well, just make hijrah. Just make hijrah, that'll solve the problem. Just move to the Muslim world, Move to the Muslim world. You don't have to worry about these issues. You heard the messages from the brother. His main problem is coming from the Muslim world. He's in a Muslim society and a Sharia court. And this is how he's being treated. So we need to look at, well, what does the Sharia say? What does Islamic law say? So this hadith is about being kind and tolerant to women. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "Take my advice with regard to women. Act kindly towards women, for they were created from a rib, and the most crooked part of a rib is its uppermost, meaning the head." So this is again another hadith that reinforces that for as far as men are concerned, you're not going to understand women. Like, they're not rational creatures in the same way that men are rational creatures. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying in a Sahih Hadith that's found in Bukhari and Muslim, that they're made from the rib. Hawa, the spouse of Adam ﷺ, was made from his rib. And the rib is not straight. The rib is crooked. So if you try to straighten the rib, you're going to break it. If you leave it alone, then it's going to be crooked. It's going to have these quirks. It's going to have these, weird things, right? So you have to be kind. Be kind to women. Be gentle. Be benevolent. This is benevolent, masculine leadership that we find in the Sunnah. And then Imam an-Nawawi comments on this hadith. He says, this hadith encourages treating women with benevolence and being kind to them, being patient with their crooked morals, tolerating the weakness of their minds, hating divorce from them without a reason, and not seeking to straighten them out in the sense of removing their imperfection. So Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah has these words of wisdom in his sharh commentary on the hadith. All right, so that's talaq. That was all. We had to lay down a lot of principles, a lot of ideas to talk about talaq and the wisdom that why do husbands have this right, unilateral right to issue a divorce, a talaq, and women don't have the same right. Hopefully now you have more of appreciation for the wisdoms in Islam for this rule, and those who ignore Islam and those who go against these traditional principles within Islam, there's suffering involved in life, and we see that in the dystopian world dominated by liberalism and feminism all around us. Now we go to the second type of divorce, which is Tafriq, or sometimes called fasakh. What is Tafriq? So imagine this scenario. People will say, okay, if a husband has this right in Islam to issue divorce, what if he is abusing her? What if he's mistreating her? She's trapped. She's like a prisoner. This is the worst kind of injustice. Well, that's not the whole story. You have another type of divorce that's called tafriq. And so imagine the wife is not getting her Islamic rights that she's due. So, for example, the husband doesn't pay her maintenance. He's not actually buying her what she needs. He is beating her black and blue and damaging her. He is, spreading rumors about her and insulting her in society, damaging her reputation where she's suffering some severe harm, or he's stealing from her. Maybe she's inherited some wealth from her parents or from family, and he's stealing that. Basically, he is violating her Islamic rights. So she can go to the Islamic authority and the Islamic judge, the qadi, and she can complain. And the Islamic court will then do an investigation. gather the data, ask the witnesses, figure out what's really going on. Is what she's saying true or not? It's not a system of just believe all women. She just goes to the court and says, oh yeah, he's abusing me, and say, oh, okay, you're divorced. No, he has to actually, the court system has to investigate, verify. If the complaints are valid, then the judge annuls the marriage, gives the fasakh, and she keeps the mahar. The bride gift, she keeps it. And it doesn't matter if the husband agrees or disagrees with the judgment that this is a qadi. This is an Islamic court. So this is fasakh. All the legal schools agree on the ability of women to get married, their marriage annulled. But there's the majority opinion and a minority opinion. This is an important nuance, as we'll explain. So the Hanafis, the Shafis, and the Hanbalis, they're in one camp, and then the Malikis are in a separate camp. They're the minority. And what's the difference? What are these two approaches? So when it comes to the majority, there are a very limited list of specific problems that will justify the dissolution or the annulment of the marriage through Tafriq. So for example, the husband is impotent. He can't perform, basically. He can't provide her children. Or maybe the husband has severe mental or physical health problems. This is also an issue, like he suffers from leprosy, or he has some kind of mental psychosis and goes clinically insane. Or the husband has disappeared. Mafqood. He's disappeared. There's no contact with him. No one knows where he is for a specific amount of time over years. Then these are reasons that the marriage can be annulled. This is the Hanbalis, the Hanafis, and the Shafis. The Malikis were slightly different. Okay, the Malikis said that there has to be harm, darar, that justifies the separation or the annulment. They don't specify, when you go to the ulama of the Maliki school, they don't specify exactly which types of harm justify divorce, like a comprehensive list. That's not given. But the Malikis allow the judge to make a determination. The qadi will make the determination. However, Malikis don't say that, any type of harm, like, it's just open-ended. When you actually go to their books, the classical books in the Maliki school, they don't say that, it's just any kind of harm. Whatever she thinks is harmful, you just take her word for it. No, there are three general assumptions about this type of harm. The harm has to be something significant, number one. Number two, the husband has to be the cause of the harm. He has to be the one that's at fault. It can't be a situation like, he hit me, and it turns out that, he hit you, but you hit him also. In fact, you hit him much harder. Or he insulted me. Well, you insulted him too. So the husband has to be the one that is the cause of the harm. He's the one that is solely at fault. And number three, the husband's harm-causing behavior must be a violation of the Sharia. So let's look at some of the quotes from these scholars. So Ibn Farhun is a Maliki jurist, and he says, quote, harm includes no longer talking to her, turning his face away from her when they're in bed, and giving painful beatings. So he's just not talking to her at all. He is, not fulfilling her marital rights in bed, and he's giving painful beatings. But harm does not include preventing her from going to the bath and cleaning herself, or disciplining her for refusing to pray, or taking other women as concubines. So if he, takes concubines, or he takes a second wife, or he refuses her to go to the bath house, they have public bathhouses at this time in history. He says, you can't go out for, not necessarily to wash yourself, because you can do wudu, that's something that's obligatory, but the bathhouse is a separate thing. It's like a social thing to go out and to the bathhouse. So if he says, no, you can't do that, this doesn't count as darar. This doesn't count as harm, according to Ibn Farhun, rahimahullah. Then you have another Maliki scholar, Ali al-Adawi. He says the recognized harm for which the wife has the right to seek divorce includes reducing her rightful maintenance, burdening her with work that's not her duty, insulting her, beating her severely, or for some reason other than proper discipline, guarding against something else. Proper discipline is like if he disciplines her for neglecting prayer, fasting, or performing the ritual purification after major impurity. So all of these jurists acknowledge that the husband has the right to discipline his wife, and discipline means you have authority. So this is the basis for this is the verse from Surah An-Nisa that we talked about earlier in this stream. So the husband has the right. The wife can't claim that, he abused me. Well, he has the right to establish the law, establish discipline. He has that authority, and just because he does that and you don't like it, that is not a valid reason to consider yourself having been harmed and therefore deserving an annulment of your marriage. You see the logic here. So the Malikis, harm is the issue that has to be addressed, but it's strictly defined what is actually harmed, or it's strictly restricted. Also, the Maliki jurist Ahmed Dardir, rahimahullah, this harm includes what is not permissible according to Islamic law, such as abandoning her without a legitimate reason, hitting her likewise without a legitimate reason, insulting her and insulting her father, such as calling her daughter of a dog, daughter of a disbeliever, daughter of an accursed person, as often occurs among the rabble. This is like damaging her reputation. Meaning the husband, is disciplined for that by authorities if he, violates her rights in that way. In addition to the divorce, as is apparent, it also includes engaging in anal intercourse with her, but meaning the harm does not include preventing her from going to the bathhouse or to watch spectacles, or disciplining her for neglecting prayer, or taking concubines and marrying other wives. So he can take concubines and he can have other wives, and she won't like it, but she has no grounds for a divorce. Like, this is not considered harm. This is not a violation of the Sharia. So this might come as a shock to some of the listeners. So, and preventing her from going to the bathhouse or watching spectacles, like entertainment, like he can limit that. And he might limit that for the purpose of her rectification, because what if she's socializing with the rabble, like she's socializing with bad people? He has the right to restrict her from that by preventing her from going to the house. This is what Islamic law actually requires, or gives the right of the husband to do this. And then the wife cannot complain about this and say, he's abusing me. You see? So this is Islamic law. This is what the Sharia says. This is what has been detailed in fiqh. This is what our scholars have preserved. This is what Islam is. And the basis of it, we've read. It's coming straight from the Quran and Sunnah. And they're elaborating this. So let's just recap what we talked about with Tafriq. Hanafis, Shafis, and Hanbalis accept a limited set of severe problems. Malikis accept broader harm from the husband as a reason for tafriq, but must be severe, one-sided, and it must violate the Sharia. In all cases, the Islamic judge only has authority to issue tafriq after investigation. So this is the summary. So does this mean that we have no-fault divorce in Islam? Is the Maliki view no-fault divorce? No, the woman is not entitled to a divorce simply because she wants it or she's sad. Rather, she's only entitled to the divorce if the husband is guilty of inflicting upon her significant forms of harm which violate the Sharia. And even then, this determination is left to a judge who's given discretion to accept or reject the wife's request for a divorce. So this is not anywhere near no-fault divorce. So what is the point of going into this nuance of the Maliki school? Well, many modernist reformers claim to be following the Maliki position. They take the Maliki position and they expand the definition of darar, of harm. In reality, they're just distorting the Maliki position and lying about it. And we'll come to this later. Sorry, I don't know why my phone is not silent. So now let's talk about khula. Actually, let's take a pause so that we can read some super chats. I'm only going to read super chats that are directly related to the topic because I don't want to derail everything. But I'll get to your other super chats later, inshallah, at the end, if we have time. Okay, here's a super chat from Brother Mirza. Honestly, a lot of Muslim men are responsible for their own condition, mostly because when they get married, all of them think they have a unicorn. They're not cautious in the beginning. Yeah, I agree. I think that some men are just not cautious. Other men, I think their problem is more systematic. They are buying into a system, like they're not aware of feminism and its harms. They don't realize they're living in a feminist system and they don't properly prepare. But I think this is like victim blaming. I think these men are victims of a terrible system, a destructive system, and that's the main problem. Like, even if you give Muslim men all the education about women and choosing the right spouse, these problems will persist, and it doesn't matter how good of a man he is, how rich, how good looking, how knowledgeable imagine like the Brad Pitt, except he's like an alim and a sheikh. He's like has the best, and he's rich, super wealthy, good looking, super knowledgeable. Even he's going to face these problems and divorce because the system is designed. When you have this kind of no-fault divorce, it's going to lead to these kinds of problems. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Let's see. It baffles me how the scholars who claim to be fuqaha lose all of their knowledge of fiqh when a woman starts moving her lips. That's a good comment. Jazakallah khair. Let's see. Sheikh Asim even said in one of his videos where he mocked this man asking his wife to be fit unless he has 6 packs. I'm not familiar with that video. Okay, Jazakallah khair for your super chat. Sheikh Asim meant husband can't overrule the Sharia court. So we're going to talk about this detail because it was not clear what he was talking about in the clip that I showed. He mentioned the Sharia court, but he also mentioned khula. And those are two separate issues. What exactly was meant? We also have to realize that the Sharia courts, just because it's labeled a Sharia court, does not mean that they're actually applying the Sharia, because unfortunately, many of these courts have been applying a reformed Islamic law. Reformed according to what? According to feminism. Yeah, some of these are not directly related, so if we have time, inshallah, at the end I'll read them. Okay, yeah. Let's move on because some of them are not exactly related. So I don't want to derail the entire conversation on divorce. Okay, so now we talked about talaq, we talked about tafriq. Now let's talk about khul'. So a basic rundown in a nutshell. Imagine the husband is not doing anything wrong. He's not violating her rights, but the wife is simply not happy. She is, for whatever reason. So she can request that he divorce her in exchange for her returning the mahar. She returns the bridal gift, and then he issues the talaq. This is khula. So what if he says no? That's the big question. What if he doesn't agree? She wants out, but he doesn't want her to leave. So what happens in that case? Does she have the right to force it? When we heard the first clip at the beginning, it seems like Sheikh Asim is saying, yes, she has that right. So overwhelming majority of scholars across all schools say that the husband's consent is required. Okay, this is the overwhelming majority. If he says no, then no divorce takes place. Okay, so if she has no legitimate reason, if she had a legitimate reason, like, okay, he's impotent, or he's missing, or he's not paying the nafaqah, she doesn't need khula. And she shouldn't go for khula, because if she goes for khula, this third option, she has to pay back the mahar. But he is actually violating her rights. She can just have a qadi who investigates the matter, and if her claims are valid and they're Islamically legitimate, he will give her the divorce, the separation. But in the case of khula, the husband is not violating her rights. He's giving her all her rights. He's giving her all of her rights Islamically. And in that case, the overwhelming majority within all the schools, Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, they say the husband has to agree. It has to be mutual consent for the divorce to actually take place if she requests it. She can't say, okay, I want out, and then exit. That's actually virtually unfound, virtually impossible to find anyone who says that she can get the divorce without his consent. But there is this anomalous view that has really been popularized in the modern period to the extent that it's become the dominant view now. Magically, we'll see why. That she can go to a qadi, and the qadi can grant the khula without the husband's consent. The qadi will say, okay, yeah, you're not happy with your husband, okay, divorce. I'll separate you. Notice how this is different from Tafriq. It's different because he's not violating her Islamic rights, but she just wants out. The qadi can grant the khula. And this anomalous view, by the way, is that it's a khula, meaning she has to return the mahar. Now we find, the situation where the qadi is telling her, yeah, I'll give you the khula, I'll dissolve, you can divorce, and you don't even have to return the mahar, right? And that's what we heard from the so-called Sharia court in this country that the messages at the beginning of the stream was mentioning. So if we look at the Quran, there is a basis for khula. It is not lawful for you to take back anything that you have given your wives, except where both fear that they cannot maintain the marriage within the bounds set by God. If the arbiters suspect that the couple may not be able to do this, then there will be no blame on either of them if the woman opts to give something for her release. So giving back the mahar. This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 229. And then the main hadith regarding khula is this one. The wife of Thabit ibn Qais radiallahu anhu came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, O Allah's Messenger, I do not blame Thabit for defects in his character or his religion, but I, being a Muslim, dislike to behave in an un-Islamic manner if I remain with him. So she was worried that she wasn't attracted to him, and she was worried that she wouldn't be able to meet her Islamic duties as his wife, Thabit's wife. So she goes to the Prophet ﷺ asking him what to do. And the Prophet ﷺ said, will you give back the garden which your husband has given you as mahar? So return the garden. And she said yes. Then the Prophet ﷺ said to Thabit, O Thabit, accept your garden, accept the mahar back and divorce her. So this is khula. This is the Prophet ﷺ advising the wife of Thabit. And notice it's interesting how she's concerned about serving his Islamic rights. She's worried about not meeting her end of the bargain, her end of the contract. That's what she's worried about. Contrast that with many of these Muslim women today. Like, they don't have any kind of concern about meeting the contract. They don't have any kind of concern about doing what's needed to serve their husbands, doing what's needed to accomplish what they promised to do and what's implicit and explicit within the Islamic marriage contract. They have no concern for that, or they don't fear Allah. Contrast it with what's described in this hadith. So this is Khul. And there's another version that says the sister of Abdullah ibn Ubay narrated, with the addition that the Prophet ﷺ said to Thabit's wife, "Will you return his garden?" She said yes and returned it. And then the Prophet ﷺ ordered Thabit to divorce her. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered Thabit to divorce her. So then this raises the question, okay, he ordered, what is actually the order here? The Prophet ﷺ says to Thabit, accept the garden, meaning accept the mahar back and divorce her once. The question is whether Thabit is required to do this. Is he required? Did the Prophet ﷺ order him to do it so that his consent doesn't matter? Or is the Prophet ﷺ just advising him? Is the Prophet ordering him, meaning it's obligatory, he has to divorce her when she returns the mahar? Or is he just advising, please go ahead and do it? You can reject, but I advise you to accept it in this case. So those are the two possible interpretations of this hadith. And this has to do with imperatives. Like if you've studied grammar, in any language, there are imperatives like verbs that like go, do, read, eat, drink, sit. These are imperatives. Fi'l amr in Arabic. So using an imperative can have two meanings. The first meaning is that the imperative, you have to do it, it's obligatory, or the second meaning that it's recommended or it's allowed, but it's not obligatory. So someone could tell you, go get a haircut. Go get a haircut. This is an imperative. You're being commanded. Go get a haircut. This could be an obligation. Imagine your father tells you, go get a haircut. When he's saying go get a haircut as your father, he's telling you do it. You have to do it. I'm requiring you. I'm ordering you to do it. But if a friend says, go get a haircut, maybe it's just a recommendation. He's encouraging you to do something to look your best. It's not, you better get a haircut. It's go get a haircut. I think it's a good idea. These are the two interpretations of imperatives, and it's very relevant to the hadith. So in usul al-fiqh, the principles of fiqh, scholars emphasize that in the Arabic language, imperatives can convey obligation, wujub, but they can also indicate that something is recommended. It's irshad, it's a recommendation. It's not wujub, it's not obligatory. So there are many examples of this in the Quran. For example, in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, when Allah says, when the Friday prayer has ended, disperse in the land and seek out God's bounty. So when Allah is saying disperse in the land, fantashiru is a command. It's fi'l amr, command form of the verb. Does that mean that this is required? And then he says seek out wabtaghu, seek out the bounty of Allah min fadlillah. Is that required? What if after Friday prayers you want to go take a nap? Can you take a nap, or are you required? Is it wajib for you to go and seek the bounty of Allah? You have to go work, or you have to go farm, or whatever your vocation is. The ulama in fiqh, they understood this as it's optional. You can go back to seeking the bounty of Allah, or you can go take a nap. You can go do whatever you want. Halal. This verse is not literally saying you have to. It's wajib for you to do this. That's one example. Also in Quran, chapter 5, verse 2, "O you have believed, do not violate the rights of Allah or the sanctity of the sacred month, or neglect the marking of the sacrificial animals, and garlanding them, or violate the safety of those coming to the sacred house, seeking bounty from their Lord and his approval." So it's talking about Hajj, the rituals of Hajj. "But when you have completed the rites of Hajj, then hunt." Then hunt. So is Allah saying that once you finish Hajj, go and do some hunting? Go and hunt some animals? Is this required? Is this wajib? The command form is used in the verse, but it's understood by scholars that this just means that it's permissible. Now you can hunt. Now that you're no longer in on Hajj, now you can hunt, whereas before you were not allowed to do that. So it's permissibility. This is usul al-fiqh. So in the hadith, going back to the hadith of Thabit, the Prophet ﷺ could have been indicating wujub, or he could have been indicating irshad. And the pre-modern scholars, overwhelming majority, all said that this is irshad. The Prophet ﷺ is just giving advice to Thabit. He's not ordering him that this is wajib, you have to. She gives you back the mahar, you have to, then you're obligated to divorce her. This is not what the Prophet ﷺ meant. Rather, he's just recommending it and advising it. But it's up to Thabit himself to decide what he wants to do. And this is also backed up by Imam Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, who has the greatest commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari. And he says in commenting on this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ's statement, accept the garden and divorce her, is an imperative that functions to provide advice and remedy the situation. It's not meant to convey obligation. So it's irshad and islah. This is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, not commanding him that this is wajib, you have to divorce her. So Imam Ibn Hajar agrees. So conclusion, overwhelming majority of scholars said husband's consent is necessary for khula. He has to consent. She can't just decide, I'm unhappy, I'm leaving, and here's your mahar and I'm gone. He has to mutually agree. But there were anomalous opinions that we find. And the most famous is from Imam Shawkani. So he says, regarding the Prophet ﷺ statement, accept the garden, in Ibn Hajar, Imam Ibn Hajar mentions in Fath al-Bari, it's mentioned that this is a directive for guidance and reconciliation, not an obligation, but Ibn Hajar didn't mention any evidence indicating that the imperative command should not be understood in its primary literal sense of obligation, of wujub. The apparent meaning of the hadiths in this chapter is that the mere existence of discord from the woman's side is sufficient to make khula, divorce, permissible. So this is Shawkani. Now, the thing to note about Shawkani is that he is in the modern period. So he is. It can be claimed that he has been affected or influenced by the West. And there are indications for this in his statements. And he's, we have to ask, why does it take, 1,300 years of Islam before we find a scholar who has this kind of view and expresses it in this very clear-cut way? That's a question to ask. Another question to ask is Imam Shawkani just reflecting a kind of westernization or Enlightenment ideals that had been being spread at this time in the 19th century throughout the Muslim world through colonialism? And even if he himself did not directly go to Europe or directly be under the influence of colonizers, could he still have been affected? Allahu alam. But it's interesting. This, we have to be honest. This opinion exists. He's saying that, the hadith is giving obligation. If the wife returns the mahar, then khula should take place. He has no choice. His consent is not necessary. But there are other indications. There are other hadith. So, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, any woman who asks her husband for a divorce for no reason, the fragrance of paradise will be forbidden to her. This is a Sahih hadith. So not only will paradise, Jannah is forbidden, is haram for her, the fragrance of Jannah is haram for her. That's how far in distance she'll be from paradise if she is asking her husband for a divorce for no legitimate reason. And then another hadith, no woman asks for a divorce when it's not absolutely necessary, but she will never smell the fragrance of paradise, although its fragrance can be detected from a distance of 40 years travel. So the same message, she will never smell the fragrance of paradise. So this is very serious. This means being consigned to the hellfire for eternity. And it's interesting that the Prophet ﷺ worded it as any woman who asks her husband for a divorce. No woman asks for a divorce. If the woman just has the right to get the divorce, she just gives back the mahar, and he's obligated, her husband is obligated to divorce her. Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ say that? But instead he worded it as the wife asking the husband for a divorce. So this is kind of supporting the vast majority opinion that it is up to the husband ultimately to decide to accept the mahar back and grant the divorce. Yes. So the dominant opinion of all the four legal schools is that khul requires the husband's consent. When these scholars write about khul, they do not even mention the possibility that a wife may obtain a khul without the husband's consent by going to the judge, because it's like a no-brainer. This is because they take it for granted that such is appropriate. The scholars simply assert that khul is only valid if there is mutual consent, or taradi, from both husband and wife. There has to be mutual consent for the khul to take place. The reasoning is that khul is an aqd, like other Islamic contracts. It's a general principle in the Sharia that all contracts require mutual consent. So this is the logic of it. And if you just allow one side to opt out of the contract, then this is contrary to the idea of a contract. So here are representatives from the different madhahib, the schools of thought, who are referring to this mutual consent. So Imam Sarakhsi, major Hanafi jurist, rahimahullah, says the khula is permissible whether it's done in the presence of the ruler or otherwise, because it's a contract that depends on mutual consent like other contracts. It's akin to a talaq, divorce, in exchange for compensation. The husband has the authority to initiate the divorce, and she has the authority to commit the payment of compensation. Therefore, there's no reason to require the presence of the ruler for this contract. Sarakhsi in this quote is mainly like concerned with whether there needs to be a ruler or some kind of authority present for the khula to be valid. But he's basically saying that no, it's not required. This is like any other contract. It just requires mutual consent, taradi. This is from the Hanafi school. Ibn Qudama, rahimahullah, from the Hanbali school. Khul does not require a judge. So again, the same kind of mas'ala. The question, do you need a judge? Do you need authority for this? No, you just need mutual consent. The husband has to agree. Imam Ahmad stated explicitly that khul is permissible without the ruler. Al-Bukhari narrated this from Omar and Uthman. May Allah be pleased with them. And this is also the opinion of Shurayh, Az-Zuhri, Malik, Ash-Shafi, Ishaq, and the people of opinion. That's referring to Hanafis, I guess. However, Hassan and Ibn Sirin said it is not permissible except in the presence of the ruler. So that's where there's some ikhtilaf. Some said that it requires some authority to be present to accept. Others said no. Our evidence is the statement of Omar and Uthman, and because it is an exchange transaction and it does not require the ruler, similar to sale and marriage. Just like the nikah does not require an authority to be present, well, khula doesn't require it either. It just requires, additionally, is the dissolution of a contract by mutual consent akin to a cancellation. So again, mutual consent, this is what's being mentioned in Al-Mughni, in the Hanbali school. Then you have Imam Muhammad al-Mut'i, who is a Shafi. He is more contemporary, but he says, and if she does not dislike anything about him and they mutually agree on khul, divorce, without any specific reason, it's permissible. This is based on the verse from Allah that we referenced in Surah Al-Baqarah 229. Moreover, it's the dissolution of a contract by mutual consent made to prevent harm, so it's permissible without the presence of harm, similar to cancellation in sales. So, if the wife doesn't have to have a reason, she just wants to get out, and she offers the mahar, and he accepts. He says, yeah, I'm kind of tired of you too. Okay, I'll get back the mahar and give you the divorce. Note that even if he gives the divorce, he still put a lot of resources into that marriage. So in certain senses, it's a loss. All else being equal, it's a loss for him, but this is why mutual consent is required. And interesting, however, if he hits her or denies her rights, hoping she will seek khula with some of her wealth, it's not permissible based on the verse from Allah. So if a husband tries to basically scare her off so that he can get the mahar back, this is obviously not permissible. So all schools agree that mutual consent is required for khula. It's Imam Shawkani who says no. Are there pre-modern scholars who said no, that the husband's consent is not necessary? Because Shawkani, remember, is he really a pre-modern scholar? Is he really a classical scholarly authority? Not really. He's living in the 19th century. So there's this kind of modern influence that unfortunately, like dust, affects everyone. But is there anyone else who says that, okay, the husband's consent is not required for khula? Some modern scholars have claimed this about Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and Ibn Rushd, but the evidence is not clear. I haven't been able to find it. We haven't been able to find clear evidence that Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, says that a husband's consent is not required, but there are some in the modern period who claim this about Ibn Taymiyyah without necessarily having a clear-cut reference from Ibn Taymiyyah himself and his own statements. And same with Ibn Rushd. So this is the passage that's cited for Ibn Rushd. And the fiqh is that the payment of compensation and khul' was instituted for the woman as a counterpart to the power of divorce held by the man. For when the power of divorce was given to the man in case he detested the woman, the option of khul' was given to the woman in case she detested the man. This passage is cited, but it's not clear where Ibn Rushd is saying that the husband's consent is not required. You have to kind of take an extra step to make the inference that, oh, he's saying that men and women are equal. Power of divorce was given to the man, so then the option of khulu was given to the woman, so that means they're both, unilaterally can be declared by either the husband or the wife. That's like a interpretation that's being projected onto the text, in my opinion. It's not clear where this is giving the wife authority to unilaterally divorce her husband without getting his consent. And then again, with Ibn Taymiyyah, it's not clear where he has actually stated this clearly, that mutual consent is not required. So it's a question mark. But even if you do find a statement from Ibn Taymiyyah, and it's not contradicted by another one of his statements, that's still one alim, one scholar within Islamic history. Can you find two? Can you find three? Yet the overwhelming majority, it's such an overwhelming majority that's not even questioned. The idea of it doesn't even come to mind. And it's because of the logic of marriage and divorce. Imagine, for example, I give you $50,000 for a car. I have the car, I'm driving the car, and then you say, oh, actually I changed my mind. Here's the money back. I'm going to take my car back. Can you do that? No, there needs to be another agreement made with mutual consent for me to return the car to you in exchange for the money that I initially paid you, right? It would be a violation of my rights. I bought the car. We mutually consented to the initial sale. I'm giving you $50,000. You're giving me this beautiful luxury car. Now I'm enjoying this luxury car. I drive it for years. Have many good memories driving this beautiful car. And then you come one day and you say, actually, I'm taking this car back. Here's your money. You have to give me the car back. It's like, what? Why would I do that? It's mine. And the jurists, in a similar way, understood marriage. Marriage, you're giving the mahar, and that gives you certain rights, and that can't just be dissolved by especially when you're the one who's giving the mahar, you're the one who is paying. Then the one that you're paying just reverses that without your consent. This was inconceivable. And this is why the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, and the only kind of dissenting opinion comes in the 19th century from Imam Shawkani. So this is anomalous. It's an anomaly. You know what anomaly means? It's strange, not found elsewhere. So just the recap: 3 types of divorce: Talaq, Tafriq. With Tafriq, there are 2 views. There's the majority view of the Hanafis, the Shafis, and the Hanbalis, and then there's a minority Maliki view that they talk about harm, darar, and they give conditions. What is harm that justifies a divorce issued by the qadi, by the judge? The Malikis have that broader view, but they still give parameters for what counts as darar. And then you have khula. And there's, I don't want to say consensus or ijma, but, where are these opinions that a khula can be achieved without mutual consent? So modern reformism, this is where we get into the reform. So you have this dominant position within Islamic history, and then you have these developments in the West that we talked about, this history of no-fault divorce coming into play and being widely accepted, and then, put into the legal system in the US and in Europe. And now there's pressure on the rest of the Muslim world to also adopt these standards of freedom and equality and destruction of patriarchy. So then, now this is where we get into Islamic reform. Most divorce reforms have occurred between the beginning and end of the 20th century. And there's three main ways that this is done when it comes to divorce. Promote equality by restricting the husband's right to divorce, his right to issue talaq. Number two, expand the Maliki view of Tafriq, basically expand the idea of darar or harm. And number three, spread the anomalous view of khula. Spread this kind of idea that women, whenever they want, they can exit the marriage, and the husband has to agree to it. So number one, restricting the husband's right to divorce. There's this case in Indonesia where the gender activists were saying that, well, there's an iddah period for women when there's divorce, so there needs to be an iddah period for men. Which makes no sense, because the whole point of iddah is to make sure that she's not pregnant. The wife is not pregnant, so that she doesn't divorce and then remarry, and then, it's not clear who's the father of the child when it turns out, oh, she was actually pregnant and we didn't know. That's the wisdom behind the iddah. It doesn't make sense for a man to have to go through an iddah. He's not going to get pregnant, but it's unequal. There's no equality. You have to have men and women both go through the iddah. So you have these are Muslim activists who are calling for this. But that's just one example. Other types of restrictions, saying that the talaq has to be approved by a judge. You have to have the judge there to approve the talaq. This is, again, not found in Islam. In the fiqh of any of the schools, there's no judge that's required for talaq. The husband can just issue it. And another way that they're restricting divorce is by punishments for issuing talaq without a judge. So if a husband issues the talaq, his anti-talaq, he can get punished if he didn't do that in front of the proper authorities. Also, there are laws outlawing triple talaq. In India, for example, this is, again, the husband it's sinful, but if he issues triple talaq, this is becoming something that comes now with legal consequences or punishments. So this wasn't found in Islam traditionally. Expanding the Maliki view of Tafriq. So this is associated with figures like Sheikh bin Baya, the Mauritanian scholar who is the teacher of Hamza Yusuf. He has an essay. The translation of the title is "What is the regulating principle of harm according to the Maliki opinion that's relied upon in fatwas?" So he's talking about darar, and he's saying, quote, "The regulating principle for harm is ambiguously applicable, meaning that it's more apparent and pronounced in some instances than others. Therefore, defining harm precisely is difficult. This does not mean there's no distinction between severe and minor harm or between strong and weak harm. However, it's left to custom. As with many general legal principles, this indicates that in the Maliki school, there's no precise definition except through ijtihad based on custom. However, Maliki scholars attempted to make it more precise through examples." So this is expanding the idea of harm according to custom, but you can see where this will be problematic, because you have women who will claim that, oh, well, he harmed me, but emotionally. He harmed me psychologically. He harmed me, financially. In Islam, traditionally, there's no concept of these harms, but in our culture, in our custom, this is, the non-Muslim masses where we live, they consider this to be harmful. So therefore, this is a valid reason for a judge to dissolve the marriage. you know. So the whole point of this, the whole point of expanding darar is to approximate, get closer and closer to no-fault divorce, get closer and closer to a situation where a wife just claims, yeah, you know, I don't like him, and yeah, he hurt me or he abused me. And then a qadi or a Islamic council, quote unquote, coming in and saying, oh, okay, well, we're just following the Maliki opinion, and this is darar, this is harm according to custom. You know, this is what Bin Bayah has said. Therefore, we dissolve your marriage. Like, you're basically playing games with the Sharia. You're playing games in order to approximate and get closer and closer to this Western notion of no-fault divorce. The third strategy, spreading this anomalous view of khula. Shawkani's view has become the favored opinion among many contemporary scholars. So we see Sayyid Sabiq, for example, the author of Fiqh as-Sunnah, a very influential popular book, a modern book from the 20th century. You have Ahmed al-Tayyib, who is Sheikh al-Azhar, current Sheikh al-Azhar. And there's an article that was written about his view on this that we're going to read quotes from. Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, also Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, also. They also take this position. So we see it spreading, like, whereas it wasn't a dominant position, it wasn't even a mentioned position for the overwhelming majority of ulama. Now it's being adopted and spread. And we saw Sheikh Asim as well mention it. So this is an interesting quote from Ahmed al-Tayyib. It's from Al-Ihram in Egypt, their newspaper, and he's quoted, if it's the husband's right to divorce his wife by talaq while upholding all her established rights, it's similarly the wife's right to divorce her husband by khula while upholding all his established rights. So there's equality. The prevalent form of khula at that past time was consensual khula, meaning khula that depends on the husband's consent. So Ahmed al-Tayyib is acknowledging that in the past, the kind of khula that took place required the husband's consent. He's acknowledging it. If he agreed, the khula was given. If he chose, he kept his wife with him under his guardianship. It's up to him, his decision. This interpretation of khula undoubtedly deprives the woman of her legitimate right to free herself from the grip of an unjust husband. This situation remained dependent on the husband's consent until the issuance of Law Number 1 of the year 2000, which restored to the wife her right to khula from her husband and to divorce him with a final separation, whether the husband consented or not. Okay, so it's interesting. Like, alhamdulillah, the law came, the Law Number 1 in the year 2000 that restored, women were being oppressed for literally centuries, but alhamdulillah, the law, the secular law came and restored her right to khula, to leave the marriage without the husband's consent. So this is reformism laid bare, and his mindset is really revealed by this. This is Sheikh al-Azhar, reformist institution, unfortunately. So for many reasons, not just this khula issue. But it's noteworthy because he says that in the past, khula was understood as requiring the husband's consent. She couldn't just exit the marriage at will. But now we've changed that. Alhamdulillah, now we've returned her legitimate right to free herself from the grip of an unjust husband. Like, subhanAllah, like the whole point of Tafriq is, like, if he is unjust, like he is violating her rights, then she can get a divorce through the qadi. The judge will give her justice. Justice wasn't being deprived, right? The whole at the beginning of the quote, like, it was just assumed. Like, here, let me go back. The whole premise at the beginning was that he is upholding all of her rights. He's giving her all her rights. So where's the injustice? The injustice is that she wants something and she doesn't get it. That's the injustice, that the law has finally restored justice to these poor oppressed women. So again, this is reformism. There's also this noteworthy quote from Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. If we are unable to reconcile the spouses under any circumstances and he refuses to divorce and she refuses to stay with him, then some scholars hold that khul' becomes obligatory in this situation provided she returns the full mahar to him. This view is held by some Hanbali scholars. Ibn Muflih, a student of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, said, our Shaykh had different opinions on this scenario, whether khul' is obligatory or not. Some Hanbali scholars explicitly stated that khul' is obligatory and must be enforced, citing the Prophet ﷺ's instructions to Thabit radiallahu anhu. They said that this imperative communicates obligation, and because there is no other way to resolve this dispute and conflict except through this method, resolving disputes and conflicts among Muslims is obligatory, and whatever is necessary to fulfill an obligation is itself obligatory. This view is correct because it does not harm him as he gets his wealth back. Their situation where she is left hanging and unable to marry and he remains in an unsuccessful marriage is not appropriate. So this is Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen is saying that there are Hanbali scholars who have this position in the pre-modern period, but it's not clear who these scholars are. Ibn Muflih is claiming that Ibn Taymiyyah has this view, who's a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, but where is the actual statement from Ibn Taymiyyah so that we can understand it? It's not clear. So someone who is an expert can elaborate this. So am I saying that Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen is a reformist, is a modernist? No. He's certainly not in the same category as Ahmed al-Tayyib or others. But, there's certain contextual factors in society. And when you have a society that is very different than the pre-modern period in very significant ways because of feminism, because of changing or the dissolution of gender roles, the changing in society, the expansion of the state structure, the expansion of social welfare, etc., then this kind of opinion becomes reformist because of that context, not because the author or the scholar had a kind of reformist intention. And I only cite Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen to note that this is not something that's limited to one school or one madhab or one manhaj. This is like spread across many manhaj, all of the manhaj basically. This opinion is coming into prominence or has been coming into prominence for the past century, whereas this wasn't the case in the past. It didn't have this kind of prominence, this idea that the husband's consent is not required to get a khul'. So what are the problems with modern reform? Muslim scholars have been suspicious about people distorting Islamic legal doctrine for illegitimate ends, like gratifying their own desires. Muslim scholars especially worried about two related issues, takhayyur and talfiq. So what do these things mean? Takhayyur. So takhayyur means selecting legal opinions from different legal scholars or legal schools in an unrestricted manner. So picking and choosing, basically. Whatever you want to do, whatever your desire is, you just scan the Islamic tradition and try to find one scholar who will have that position. You ignore what the majority say. You ignore any kind of usul or principles. You just find a statement or a fatwa that you like, and that's what you choose. Takhayyur is especially controversial when it involves selecting minority or anomalous opinions, nawadir, held by legal schools or by individual scholars. So this is a way you think you're following Islam, but you're actually following your desires. It could potentially be harmful if used for illegitimate ends. This is often discussed under the heading of tatabbu' al-rukhas. In this context, Muslim scholars often mention some rare or minority legal opinions that are notorious. I won't mention those legal opinions because I don't want to spread these rare opinions that people are going to start thinking are valid. Talfiq means blending together opinions held by different schools. So you mix and match, to cobble together something that is going to serve your desires or is going to match a kind of modernist's understanding. This is also a very dangerous thing. So the Hanbali jurist Muhammad as-Safarini argues that talfiq can be used to destroy marriage and facilitate zina. How? Hanafis have a minority opinion which permits women to get married without the approval of a wali. So there's a minority opinion with a Hanafi school, notorious, that a woman in certain cases can get married without having a wali. Malikis, on the other hand, have an opinion that permits marriage without witnesses. The Hanafis require witnesses. The Malikis require a wali. So each of their schools are safeguarding against zina. But talfiq, like mixing and matching, can be used to facilitate zina because a person can combine the Hanafi opinion for not requiring a wali with the Maliki opinion of not requiring witnesses. So you've created this new structure, this new set of legal rules that has no precedent, but it's essentially facilitating zina. You go into a hotel room with a woman and you say, well, I'm your husband now. Do you accept? Yes, I accept. Okay, here's I don't know, a bottle of water. This is your mahar. Let's get to it. Where it's halal. We don't need a witness because there's this minority view in the Hanafi school, and we don't need witnesses because of the Maliki school. So let's get to it. This is playing games with fiqh. This is playing games with the deen of Allah. This is talfiq. And scholars have warned against this. So to be clear, there's a spectrum, right? Because there are not all the ulama, not all the fuqaha, they categorically reject takhayyur and talfiq. There's a spectrum. Some allow, a certain degree of this. However, even those who accept these practices insist that they must be carefully limited and not be used to pursue illegitimate ends which undermine the Sharia, like destroying marriage or facilitating zina, for example, facilitating riba, like the usury. These are things that if that's really your end, and you're doing talfiq or takhayyur in order to facilitate that, then this is illegitimate. This is wrong. And even the scholars who have a more permissive attitude or position towards talfiq and takhayyur, even they will condemn this. And it's important to note that this kind of modern reformism is not unique to Islam. The same thing is being done for all religions. Okay, Christianity, for example, Christian scholars, they supported blasphemy punishments. If you're a heretic, you did get punished according to canon law, according to traditional Christianity. But because of the Enlightenment, because of modernism, you have these Christian scholars who are going back and trying to find any way to find any opinion that says, okay, you don't have to apply these punishments. You don't have to apply blasphemy punishments. You don't have to enforce this. So they scan their entire tradition, all of their books, to find any little thing, anomalous view, and say, see, we don't have to apply this part of our tradition or our law. Same with Hindu scholars. Traditionally, Hindu scholars, vast majority support the caste system, and sati, widow burning. But the modern Hindus, they will try to scan all of their texts, these hundreds and thousands of Hindu texts, and try to find anything that could be interpreted as speaking against these two things. And they say, we're against caste system. We're against sati. Right? So this kind of game, this kind of trick, and unfortunately Muslim reformers are doing the same thing. They're scanning to find anything, any kind of anomalous view, shadh view, and they're saying, see, we have it. The purpose is just to make these liberal ideals, these liberal institutions, making them Islamic, basically putting a hijab on secularism. So you can, using this kind of method of talfiq and takhayyur, create Islamic equality marriage. You can say, okay, there's no wali required. We take the minority Hanafi view. We can take the Maliki view of Tafriq, except we take the expanded view of darar, of harm, and it's determined by urf, or the custom, as we read from bin Bayya. Then number 3, we do khula without husband's consent, as we saw from Shawkani, as well as what's attributed to some minority of Hanbali scholars, and perhaps Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. So you just combine all of these and stitch together all of these, and you get, we have no fault divorce. We have this kind of equality marriage. The woman is empowered. She chooses. She can enter the marriage whenever she wants, without a wali, without her family, and she can exit whenever she wants. She doesn't have to worry about paying back the mahar. She can get the mahar, of course. She has to get what's hers, the mahar, and then she can also exit through the Maliki opinion without having to give the mahar back. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This is playing games with the Sharia in order to take something that is fundamentally liberal secularism and say, no, we have this in our tradition. We have this. Our Islam, traditional Islam supports this. Exactly this liberal secular institution. Like, who falls for this? Who falls for this? So this is not Islam. This is just playing games with the fiqh tradition in pursuit of adopting and institutionalizing Western liberal norms, ultimately destroying Muslim marriage in Islamic society. So let's do this exercise. Let's concede for the sake of argument that the minority Maliki opinion and that anomalous opinion on khula are valid in a pre-modern context. And we'll concede that takhayyur is valid and Tafriq are valid regarding these minority opinions in the pre-modern context. Yeah, they could be very valid in the pre-modern context, even though you don't really see many scholars at all taking those positions. But it could be valid. But the pre-modern context are not being used to replace the Sharia with liberal Western law and weaken Muslim marriage and family. That's the difference. In our context today, that is what's happening. That is the reality. You have this onslaught of Western liberalism that's trying to overturn the entirety of the Sharia and erase Islam. Like, that's the civilizational goal of the West that they've dedicated so much time and resources in order to do since the early 19th century. That is the context. So doing talfiq and takhayyur and taking these anomalous and minority views in the past, that could be justified. But doing it now is unjustifiable because of the context in which we're living and because of what is really the purpose of taking these kinds of minority positions. The context matters. That's what a lot of the modernists say themselves when they're trying to neuter aspects of the deen, but it goes both ways. So pre-modern mitigating factors as well is that, okay, you give women the right to issue divorce through khula and you don't need the husband's consent. There's still a lot of things that are mitigating the harm that could come from that. When you have that in modern times with no fault divorce, there's major problems. But in pre-modern times, you had a social stigma for frivolous divorce. So if you're a woman and you do khula for these frivolous reasons, other people are going to be less likely to marry you. There's a social stigma. Today, that social stigma is gone. Like, feminists have actively tried to erase that social stigma, and it's on its way out in the Muslim world as well because of the efforts of NGOs and these feminist organizations that try to push Western values on wider society. So the social stigma for divorce is being attacked and is trying to be erased. In the past, in pre-modern context, there's no feminist empowerment or entitlement. And there's no ability to just claim abuse for everything. That's a big mitigating factor against divorce, women taking advantage of any kind of khula. And then also there's no social welfare system in the past. If she wants to exit the marriage through khula without her husband's consent, she has to go back to her father's family. And that's, difficult. And again, there might be stigma associated with that. There's no social safety net. But in the feminist societies that we live in today, the feminists want to make it easier for women to exit out of marriage. So there's a social safety net. She can go on welfare. She can, live very comfortably on this welfare system. Who's paying for that? It's men who are paying taxes. But she can just exit the marriage and not face any kind of social consequence, no financial consequence, nothing. This is no fault through and through. So that's what makes it easier for her, and she's incentivized because she also gets a claim to his property. This is why introducing khula without husband's consent in the modern period is a disaster. It's like taking a match and lighting it in a room full of gasoline. Like, it's an explosive situation, and we're seeing the results of it. That was the whole point of reading that letter or those messages from the brother and the beginning of the stream. Many Muslim men are suffering, and Muslim marriage is collapsing in the same way that is collapsed in the West. So these reformers are abusing takhayyur and talfiq. So when some of these simp imams or these faux traditionalists, these compassionate imams, they say, you'll hear them. They're like, oh, we have the resources to bring reform from within the tradition. We can reform Islam from within the tradition. They emphasize this over and over again. Within the tradition, we have the tools. What they're referring to is talfiq and takhayyur. Unlimited, unconditioned. That's how they just take these anomalous views, these minority views, and they stitch things together in order to approximate liberal norms and institutions. And what's dangerous about it is that they claim that they're traditional. They go, oh, he's a traditional scholar. Oh, did you see how he's dressed? He's so traditional. Oh, do you see he has so many ijazas? He's so qualified. You know, don't criticize him. What do you know? Where did you study? This is extremely dangerous. This is how you get this reform of Muslim society, and no one is realizing it. That is happening. Like, it's happening under our noses. Why? Because when people speak out and they criticize, hey, wait, this is like a very big break from our tradition. Like, historically, we don't see this kind of view. We don't see this kind of practice or these values. Where did you study? You know, don't question what these scholars who are funded by the state, don't question what they have this state backing connected to the West. Don't question what they're doing. So this is very dangerous. And they're citing all the relevant hadith. They're citing the Quran. They're able to talk about the ulama, like these opinions. The lay Muslim is not going to be able to tell the difference. Like, okay, this is genuine, authentic Islam, or this is like talfiq. This is like a type of Frankenstein project that you're engaged in. So, of course, we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you will tread the same path as was trodden by those before you, inch by inch and step by step, so much that if they had entered into the hole of a lizard, you would follow them in this also. We said, Allah's Messenger, do you mean Jews and Christians? And the Prophet ﷺ responded, who else? Who else? So this kind of reform is exactly what Jews and Christians have done. Now Muslims are following suit, have been following suit, and are not slowing down either. So again, recap: reforming Islamic marriage, new laws on nushuz and domestic violence, minimum marriage age, asset division and communal property, child support, polygyny, marriage registration. These are all things that are also being reformed fast. And we're going to talk about a lot of them. So what are the solutions? What are the solutions? What can be done? Well, first and foremost, establishing a khilafah and imposing a khilafah that imposes the Sharia. That's the only solution. That really, because even these Islamic courts, the Sharia councils, the Sharia courts in the Muslim world, they're being influenced by feminism. They're being influenced by these Western laws. So the only way to avoid it is if you have khilafah with sovereignty that can apply and impose Islamic family law. Otherwise, what else can you do? The only thing that really prevents your wife from taking your money, taking the kids, just dissolving the marriage at will is if she fears Allah. Taqwa, that's the only thing. And that's why it's so important to teach our daughters and our wives these hadith that were mentioned in this stream. The second solution, dissolve the so-called Islamic councils. Unfortunately, you have these Islamic councils that are just issuing khula right and left with no investigation, with no due diligence, with no right. They just dissolve the marriage. A woman just goes to these so-called Islamic councils in the West, and I'll give you some examples in a second. And they say that, well, my husband is mistreating me. I want out of this. Divorce me. And this Islamic council gives them the fasakh, dissolves the marriage or gives them the khula. Based on what? No investigation, no concern for the man's rights Islamically. This is dhulm. This is such a huge violation to just issue a divorce based on one parties' testimony. And this is happening throughout the Western world, unfortunately. And there are even some councils that if you pay them extra, if the woman pays like an extra fee, they can even do express khula. Like, drive-through khula, turbo khula, just give us a little bit more money. We're going to rubber stamp the divorce. This is treachery against the Muslim community. Like, this is complete violation of Islamic values and standards and the rights of the husband. But they have no shame. So here are some examples of, hold on. Let me see. I'll just read it to you. Let me just read this. I'll read you one example of this Islamic council. Oh, someone says that Paul was in the chat. Paul Williams of Blogging Theology. Good to see you, Paul. Assalamu alaikum. Let me pull this one. Okay. The council has received the wife's categorical response that she has declined any possible hope for a reconciliation. We understand that you may have other wishes, but the relationship can only work if both parties are willing to make it work. And regardless of fault, no individual can be forced to be in a relationship against their will. Is this Islam or is this feminism? They even say fault, regardless of fault. Fault doesn't matter. Since the relation, so this is from an Islamic council, the Islamic Council in the UK. And they're sending this letter to one of these brothers. Since the relationship has, in the perspective of the applicant, broken down, and this may be her subjective opinion, but she cannot be pressured to be in a relationship against her will, and it's her prerogative to leave the relationship if she wishes so, as she has clearly expressed in this instance. Such are her fundamental Islamic rights. And since this relationship is no longer viable, at least in her perspective, therefore the council has closed the case. The talaq is granted and the case is closed. Please note that the council doesn't believe that mahar is unconditionally returned, rather that it's only in cases of fraudulent or sham nikah, which is uncovered after the nikah, shortly within weeks of the event. Therefore, the council will not be getting involved in the mahar issue. We understand that your view may differ, and that is your personal prerogative. This matter will not be discussed further. Moreover, kindly note the council only deals with matters of Islamic faith and teachings, and this has no bearing or involvement with a civil divorce, child custody, or asset finance disputes, which, if applicable, may be sought by their own processes by resorting to your legal team. Please note this case is now closed and will not be discussed further. So this is the Islamic Council. So just look at the gall. We don't want to get involved with the financial aspect. We just want to destroy your marriage and take away your rights. If she doesn't want to be in the marriage, that's all there is to it. And the mahar, that's not our business. So subhanallah. So this is abuse of the man's rights. And this is the Islamic Council. There's so many of these councils, and they just take the woman's side, whatever she says. Even if they were taking like a Maliki position on darar, like, oh, there's harm caused, she can just inflate all of her claims and exaggerate. Yeah, he abused me. He didn't actually pay the proper rent that month. And they won't investigate. They won't investigate it. They'll just accept what she's saying, believe all women, and they'll issue the fasakh. This is a crime. This is a crime. Like, and by the way, who are they? Like, this is not a qadi, right? Because the Maliki position, remember, requires a qadi. And the qadi is a representative of the khalifa. It's a legitimate Islamic authority who can issue this kind of fasakh. Not just some random Joe Schmo imam who just starts a council and, oh yeah, I'm now dissolving marriages. Like, it's ridiculous, right? Like, imagine, you have a dispute with someone, like you lend someone your car, like you lend them your car to use, and then they drive off with it. And then they take the car and they go to an imam's council, and the imam's council say, yeah, this car is no longer yours. This car is no longer yours. You don't have any right to it. Case closed. Like, like that's like how ridiculous that would be with a car. Now, this is your entire marriage. This is like your life that's being destroyed because of some Joe Schmo. He's at a masjid somewhere and he calls himself Maulana, or he calls himself Imam or Sheikh, and he's dissolving your marriage. Oh, you gave 50,000 in mahar. Too bad. That's gone. Oh, you have children. Okay, you have no right to them. And yeah, she can go to the civil court as well. And the civil court, and this is what some of these brothers are mentioning about these councils. They say, yeah, the civil court is basically like a Sharia court. The civil court, yeah, they basically apply the Sharia. So, and then when you press these councils, it's, we're following the Maliki opinion. No, you're not. You're not following the Maliki. You're following the opinion of Judith Butler. Like, you're following the opinion of Simone de Beauvoir. Like, you're following the opinion of John Stuart Mill, not any kind of Islamic scholar. Sorry, this is not found in the Maliki school. We're following the Hanbali opinion on Khul. Oh, really? You're following the Hanbali? Where did the Hanbali scholars say that the husband's consent is not required? Can you show me how many Hanbali scholars? Did Imam Ahmed say this? Did Ibn Qudama say this? Because I read Ibn Qudama in Al-Mughni, and he's referring to Turadi. He's referring to mutual consent. So please show me, all of these Hanbali scholars. So, okay, maybe they exist. Yeah, maybe there's a minority who exist. I would like to see, for transparency, what these opinions are. But then you can't just show me that, this opinion exists, therefore we're going to have we're going to reform all of these practices, and we're going to really overturn the vast majority of Islamic scholarship and institute this new standard of khula without husband's consent. Why? Because, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you justified in doing that? Why are you justified in going against the vast majority and cherry picking this opinion because it makes you, what's the reason for that? We need to know. There needs to be transparency. Anyway. Here's another letter. Let me share my screen. From another council. This is Wuzara Sharia Council, also in the UK. The applicant has made herself very clear that the marriage has broken down and beyond repair, and does not want to continue the marital relationship for the reasons she has stated. A reconciliation cannot be enforced without a desire to do so. Yeah, she just doesn't want to continue. No, there's nothing, no like Sharia reason. She just doesn't want to continue. Unfortunately, your marriage with the applicant has irretrievably broken down and is no longer workable. We suggest that you grant a divorce and resolve this matter amicably. We reserve our right of dissolving the marriage at this stage and request that you seriously consider this matter. We can post you the divorce documents to sign and terminate the marriage. If we do not hear from you, a certificate of dissolution of marriage will be issued to the applicant. Upon completion of her iddah period, the applicant shall be allowed to move on with her life. Just move on with her life. You can request for an original copy of the certificate once it's been issued with a fee and your ID. They're even they're nickel and diming this guy. Please email if you wish to do so. Note the council's dissolution of the nikah is recorded as Talaq Bain, meaning irrevocable divorce. This means you and the applicant can get back together with a brand new nikah. and parenthetical halala is not required. Oh, okay. We look forward to hearing from you in the next 7 days, and thank you in advance for your cooperation. Yeah, so just random people, decided to have a Sharia council. Oh, he's a mufti. He's a mufti, so whatever. He's a Maulana, so who are you to question the Maulana? Who are you to question the mufti? He says your divorce is dissolved. It doesn't matter, you spent whatever mahar, you put your best years of your life for this woman. She just wants to leave, and I'm granting her the divorce. So this is completely contrary to the Sharia. It's completely contrary to basic Islamic ethics and the logic of marriage and nikah and the aqd and the contract. So what can we do? Dissolve the so-called Islamic councils that are improperly ending marriages. Like, they need to be shamed. They need to be properly shamed for the kind of work that they do. Brothers who have been abused by these councils need to come out with their stories, and basically go to other imams. Like, these brothers should go to imams, go to other qualified figures, and we need to explain that this is not Islamic, so that these councils can be dissolved, and their dhulm, their oppression, can be ended by proper authorities. Imagine if you have a sales dispute. Like, I wonder, these muftis and these maulanas, like, if I get in a dispute with them, like a financial transaction, and then I go to some other mufti, and the other mufti says, sorry, simp imam, your property is now not yours anymore. Your house, your car is no longer yours. You lost the dispute. Like, that simp imam, like, what authority do you have? Like, what authority? Are you like a representative of a khalifa, or do you have some kind of judicial authority to be able to confiscate my property? Like, that's what one of these imams would say if it was their property or their rights that were being infringed. But they, at the same time, have no problem infringing on the rights of countless Muslim men. That's what being a simp is, right? Number 4. So we said number 3. Number 4, marriage contract specification. So you can also make some specifications within your nikah with a Muslim sister. Make a stipulation that you'll follow the majority opinions when it comes to any kind of issue within the marriage, including any possible divorce. Follow the majority opinions. Like, stipulate this in the contract. This is, will it ultimately hold up in court? Maybe not, like civil court. Like, that's the problem. Like, it doesn't matter what these Islamic councils say. The woman can always go to another court. And if you remember the story from the beginning, the brother was saying that, okay, the wife, his ex-wife, she didn't get as much money within the Sharia court in Jordan. She wants to also go to America. So she can go to whoever she wants and do this kind of forum shopping. Go to whatever council, whatever judge, to maximize what she's extracting from her husband. So that's always going to be a problem. That's why the number one solution, it has to be khilafah. An actual just Islamic authority. But at least in the Islamic side of it, the Islamic side is very important, because the civil judge gives the divorce, the civil courts give alimony, child support, whatever, but they can't issue the talaq. They can't say, okay, you are officially Islamically divorced. And that's significant. The husband Islamically has that right to issue the talaq. And if he doesn't grant it, then she is sinful. If she is violating his rights, she is sinful. And if she tries to get married again, then she's committing zina. So it's for these imams to come and undermine the husband's final right, the final right that he has, the final piece of leverage that he has to issue that talaq, that religious Islamic talaq. They're trying to undermine that. That's treachery. That is, dhulm upon dhulm. But you can specify within the marriage contract so that it's clear, like, these shameless imams, simp imams, they'll have to violate like a very clear nikah aqd contract that even says we will follow the majority opinions. And you can also specify an arbitrator or an imam in advance, like a trustworthy scholar. If we have a dispute, we go to this imam, we go to this sheikh. You can stipulate that in the contract in advance. That can mitigate some of these problems. Do not grant her the right to divorce. So some of these new contracts that are being pushed by simp imams is, okay, the contract will include her right for khula and her right to divorce unilaterally. We'll just include that. We'll include that in the contract. Never agree to this. Never, because if she is asking for it and her family is asking for it, that means that they're planning to use it, or they are not, they're bought into this kind of feminist mentality, and they're going to cause you a lot of headache. So if they're in it already telling you that, yeah, just grant us the right to divorce, grant our daughter the right to divorce whenever she wants, and put that in the contract, otherwise we won't marry you, all you got to do is say, ma salama. Do not marry such a person. I don't care how beautiful she is, how hot she is. This is going to be a headache for you. This is going to be a problem. She's already trying to cause problems. So do not agree to any of these stipulations that, okay, she has the right to divorce. If Allah wanted to give her the right to divorce, he would have given her that right, but he didn't. But Allah nor his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave her that right. So why are you trying to mess with the marriage contract and adding these kinds of stipulations to give her rights that Allah didn't give her? And then they're also adding this kind of stipulation, for if the husband gets a second wife, then she can get divorced. Some scholars said that this was allowed, but you don't have to agree to that. You don't have to agree to that. And I would highly suggest that you avoid getting involved with someone who's already talking and thinking like this. And then finally, do not grant the talaq. That's the final piece of leverage that you have. If she's going to violate Islamic norms and she's going to completely violate the overwhelming majority opinion within the schools, within the madhahib, the Islamic tradition, or she's even violating the consensus of all ulama. She's trying to get khula without returning the mahar. Do not grant her the talaq. Fine. She wants to get khula. Okay, fine. Maybe you'll agree. I'll give you the khula, but I need the talaq. I need the mahar. I need the mahar for you to get the talaq, for you to be divorced. If she's not going to give it back, sorry. You want to go by the hadith? Okay, we'll go by the hadith and this kind of minority interpretation or anomalous interpretation of Shawkani that goes against what the majority of scholars said, that Thabit was obliged to divorce his wife by order of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine, but she returned the garden, she returned the mahar. So we're going to go by this hadith. Contrary to my wishes, I will grant you the divorce, but you have to return the mahar. If they don't do that, do not agree to give a talaq. Okay, and sometimes the mahar, by the way, includes not only the mahar but also all the wedding costs. Okay, so sometimes these families say, "Oh yeah, we have to have this $50,000 wedding, and you have to take me on a honeymoon to this vacation spot and spend another $5,000." Okay, and they just stack up the requirements to make marriage as difficult as possible. But then when they want to get the khula, they want to leave, scot-free, I don't owe anything. You're playing games with the deen of Allah. Don't you fear Allah when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the majority of you are going to be in hellfire, or the majority of the denizens of the hellfire are women? Aren't you afraid to be one of them? And aren't you afraid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you're saying that you will never even have the smell, even the scent of Jannah will be haram for you? This is what the Prophet ﷺ is warning those women who are taking divorce for no legitimate reason. He's treating her well. He's giving all her rights. But she wants to exit. Why? What's the legitimate reason? So fear Allah. That's what you have to say to women. And that's part of implicitly in all of what I'm saying here is that implicitly we have to teach these hadith. We have to issue stern warnings. Enough of this mollycoddling. These women, these simp imams have done so much damage. A lot of these a lot of good Muslim women have been ruined, have been absolutely ruined because they would have feared Allah, they would have abided by the Sharia, they would have cared what Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have said. They would care, but they just don't know. They don't know. They haven't been taught because of these simp imams that hide these hadith. They hide the rulings and they present this kind of feminism. This is a disaster. This is so destructive. So what happened to this brother? What happened to this brother that we started the story with? Unfortunately, a very sad story. He still can't see his children, or it's very, very difficult. He didn't gain any of the money that he lost. So this is extremely traumatic. This is what so many of our Muslim brothers are going through. Alhamdulillah, he's still a good Muslim, a strong Muslim, and may Allah protect him and preserve him. But this is the kind of story that is increasingly common. And I bet you if I asked, most of you know a brother who has also suffered from this, maybe in your own family. Maybe you yourself have suffered from this kind of trauma. So I also want to end the discussion by sharing some of these outlets that are pushing the kind of anomalous view of Khul. So we already saw Asim al-Hakeem. Here's another clip from him that I want to play. Now that we've gone through everything, you're in a better position to understand what is the status of what he's saying. Again, I don't think he's trying to reform Islam, but does he understand the larger context of the things that he's saying? He's going by this minority Hanbali view, and what is that? How is it justified? And do you understand the context? I mean, these are questions with all due respect, and I'm sure the Sheikh would be happy to respond to that. But the people who are following him should ask.
Therefore, the Prophet said, ﷺ, any woman who asks for divorce without a legitimate reason would not enter paradise. And that is a serious threat.
See, this is what I appreciate about Sheikh Asim. He will say this hadith. That's why I don't put him in the same category as others. He will teach this hadith.
So a woman cannot just, simply because she's on her menses, or she doesn't feel good, and she says, I don't want you. Tallijni, divorce me. This is not valid. And this is a heinous major sin, unless there are justifications, legitimate reasons in Islam. What are they? In short, if there is harm on the woman, then she can ask for divorce. What kind of harm? Real harm. If the man is a psycho, he refuses her to leave the house. He refuses her to speak to anyone on the phone. She doesn't watch anything halal, not use the internet. And he is keeping her as a prisoner of war. This is totally haram. This is real harm. And
so he has to be more specific, not having the right to use the internet. Okay, is this legitimate grounds? We saw from the Maliki jurists, fuqaha, that were saying that, well, he can prevent her from going to the bathhouses. He can prevent her from going to spectate, different kinds of entertainment. He can prevent. That's legitimate. But what is he preventing her from having a connection to her family? This can be a grounds, because she's required in Islam to maintain ties of kinship. Silat al-Rahim is required in Islam. So if he's preventing that, then this is significant harm and is contrary to her rights. But he's making it so that, I can see, you have to be careful to think of, how is my audience that's already primed to accept feminism, and some of them are raging feminists, and you have this entire modern context, they're going to hear, oh, my husband didn't let me go out with my friends that one night, so this is significant harm, I can get a fasq. That's how some people will think, given like this sensitive issue where marriages are at stake. Then I think he should be more specific.
She can ask for divorce. If he prevents her from seeing her parents and relatives, she can ask for divorce. If he is having rage fits and he has bad moral conduct, he's abusive, his words are really hurtful, he always criticizes her, makes fun of her looks and her cooking, and abuses her and curses her and swears at her, she can ask for divorce.
Yeah, and one thing to emphasize here is it's not just because usually it's a two-way street. If it is truly a one-way street, then we saw like the classical jurists in the Maliki school say this is darar, like insulting her and mocking her lineage, etc. But usually nowadays it's a two-way street. They're insulting each other. They're having these fights and these angry matches. That I would say is more common, and the statistics also show actually that when it comes to marital conflict and anger and actual physical blows, there's 50-50 split between men being the aggressor and women being the aggressor. So he should also specify that it's one way, like the husband is just spitting this kind of these insults and this abuse against you verbally, but you're not reciprocating, because if you're reciprocating, then he's not the only one who's at fault.
If he is really ugly and she's unable to look at his face, as in the hadith of Thabit ibn Qais, where his wife could not look at him, and she said, had I not feared Allah, I would have spitted in his face whenever I look at him because of his ugliness. This is a legitimate reason. If she feels from herself that she's unable to give him his rights, whether in intimacy or obedience, and that would make her a renegade and would take her out of the fold of being a loyal, obedient, submissive wife, that is a major sin. So in order to avoid such sin, she goes for divorce. This is permissible if he's impotent or is unable to fulfill and satisfy her in terms of intimacy. If he does not provide for her financially, and he is using her as a sugar daddy, and she is the one who works and provides for the house, very legitimate reasons for divorce, and so on.
Yeah, but these are different situations, because if he's impotent or he is not providing for her, then he's violating her Islamic rights. Then fasq happens and he loses the mahar. But if she just doesn't like him and she's requesting the khula, she has to give back the mahar. So this is significant, because usually the mahar, especially nowadays, is a significant amount of money. But he's just blending all of these into the same situation.
She asks for divorce for no reason. I don't like him. He doesn't take me to Côte d'Azur every year. He doesn't change the furniture every 6 months. I just have doubts that he has a haram relationship. No proof, but it's just my gut feeling. No, this is totally prohibited, and so on.
Islam.
All right, so that I think is good, more balanced answer, more detailed than the first clip that we saw. So may Allah preserve the Shaykh. There's certain things that can easily be misinterpreted. That's the issue. Easily misinterpreted by an audience that is primed with feminism. And given our context, we can also ask, well, should women be thinking that they can just exit? They are entitled to divorce because I want out. That's the bigger question. And I wonder if the Shaykh would have this view if he knew the statistics.
Teaches that a woman is cursed for asking for a divorce for no reason. But why is the men not giving this? But why men are not giving the same warning, especially since males have the power of divorce and females in general tend to struggle more psychological and financially after divorce.
Okay, so this is an American sheikh with this organization, Faith IQ. They have videos online, so this is on their YouTube channel.
First of all, women are not cursed for asking for divorce unless they do this for the wrong reasons, or because they do this because they want to switch from a man to another, or to do this to break people's heart, or they married for the wrong reason, that she married him just in her intention to be a temporary and she just don't want. So that's where a woman is doing a sin, because that's considered a form of injustice. And that same rule applied for men, by the way. If a man marry a woman and he never intend to marry her, this marriage caused harm and it was not fair and unjust to her, that's also sin, and it's not allowed, and it's haram for the person to do that. But if a woman wants to ask for a divorce or to terminate the relationship, she's absolutely have the power to do that, which is, we call it Khul, when the woman asks for the termination of the marriage and to end the relationship.
So he's saying that the khula is the power to end the relationship. So it's just assumed that he is taking this anomalous view that she has the power, she requests it, and then he has to grant it. Otherwise, if she only has the power to ask, that's not really the power to divorce, right? If she has to ask and get his consent, then she doesn't really have the power. But I've noticed that a lot of modern imams, contemporary imams, will kind of fudge or gloss this, and it's actually inaccurate. It's giving the wrong impression to an audience that is not really attuned to these nuances, and they're already inclined to accept a feminist idea of equality marriage where, okay, if the husband has a right, the woman has to have the same exact right. But this doesn't exist in Islam.
And it is as simple as this. A woman came to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, I cannot fulfill that man's rights. Why? Because I don't like the way he looked. I can't relate to him. He's a very unattractive person to me. And that was the base for her just to the Prophet to say, okay, give him back his mahar, and he ended the marriage. So that's not true, this notion that women can't divorce or it's haram for her. No. And we see in the case women are suffering in their marriages just because of that. That's a wrong understanding.
Does Islam...
All right, so that's, again, he's glossing over a lot of the details, but the problem is, like, this is a video that will be watched by people, and they'll make big decisions that affects their marriage and maybe affects their children, and they'll just take that and run with it, thinking that, oh, well, I have the power to divorce him as I want, and go about that. So let's look at the next clip. We're getting close to 3 hours, so I just want to finish up. So this is
Myth
Hakeem
number
Institute.
2. Muslim women cannot divorce. There are multiple types of legal divorce in Islam. The first is called Talaq, and it's when the husband initiates the divorce. The ex-husband is required to pay child support, regardless of custody, and the divorced woman is entitled financial maintenance until the end of her waiting period. The second type is called Tafriq, or fasq. This is when a judge grants the woman a divorce without the consent of her husband because of any physical, social, or financial harm he may be inflicting on his wife. It can be initiated by the wife or a blood relative on her behalf to ensure her protection. The third type is called Khul, and it's when the woman has a right to divorce her husband based on any legitimate concern.
And it's calling, like, the woman has a right to divorce her husband. That's not accurate. Khula is not a right. It's not a right in the same as the husband's right to divorce. Husband can unilaterally divorce. He doesn't have to pay anything, but she has this to pay back the mahar, and she has to get his consent.
In a khul, the wife must return the dower her husband paid her at the commencement of the marriage. The complete rulings on these types of divorces are heavily detailed and circumstantial, but one thing is clear. Muslim women not only have clear ways to seek divorce and separation, but have assured protections in marriage.
Right. Yeah, so the only problem I had with that is that the way they describe it, like as a right to divorce. They mention like returning the mahar, but saying that she has the right is not accurate. Again, it's sensitive because it feeds into this incorrect mindset, the feminist mindset that there's equality between husband and wife. Okay, so let me go through the super chats. I mean, again, to end the discussion, I hope you benefited from all of these details, this research. I learned a lot in preparing for this, but we have to ask, like, why did something that was the standard in our tradition for 1400 years now is like an unheard of opinion, an unheard of opinion that women cannot divorce, or they have to have consent of the husband. That was the vast majority opinion across madahib, and now it's unheard of. Why does that happen? It's because of this liberal onslaught, feminism, really affecting Muslims throughout the world, and scholarly councils, scholarly figures pushing one type of view and really not representing what the tradition has historically said. This is a problem because this is how you get generation by generation change. This is exactly what happened to Jews and Christians. And it might seem benign. It might seem like, oh, come on, Daniel. Like, why are you making a big deal about this? Look at the horror stories. Like, listen to what these Muslim men are suffering. And this is like the canary in the coal mine. Their cries for help, that's really showing us that the big problems are just starting and they're going to get worse and worse and worse. And what are we doing to change it? Where's the systematic solution? Okay, so I gave you some suggestions at the end of the slideshow. Let's look at super chats to end, inshallah, the show. If you have any comments for me, leave them in the comment section. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't have much time to answer some of these more in-depth questions, though. Just fair warning. That are not on topic, especially. Jazakallah khair, Psychic Flux. That's very nice. Appreciate you. Jazakallah khair, Mo307. Appreciate it. Jazakallah khair, Samira. Inspector says, why do a lot of imams and shuyukh have a defeatist mentality when it comes to the idea of bringing back the caliph? Some people just suffer from inferiority complex. Some of the imams might be bought and paid for, and that's why they only promote the modern nation state. There are many reasons. Okay, Daniel, please raise awareness on the oppression of Muslims in Tajikistan. There's so much going on here, but no one talks about it. You could have a Tajik on your show to tell you more about our situation. Yeah, that's a good idea. I heard about the recent hijab ban that happened there. May Allah help the Muslims of Tajikistan. It's a very bad situation, so we'll think of what to discuss on the show, inshallah. Is it true I'm not allowed to ask a woman I'm considering for marriage if she's committed zina before, or do background check even if her past affects me? I don't know. That's not allowed, but I would take a route where she's not inclined to lie. So you should check her background by asking around, in the community that she's in, any family members that might know her. You should do that background check. But no, you can't spy into her private things. But what people know, ask people who know her family And you can ask her, like, have you been involved with others? You know, like, what's your Islamic background? Like, how you can get clues basically by asking her certain questions. You can also look at her public profile if she has one on social media. You know, she has a public profile and her picture, like, she has glamour shots and she has like 500 male friends and, you know, all these guys that she's following. Then you can kind of put, you know, two and two together, not to conclude that, oh yeah, she committed zina, but to say, like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire in this case. That's the kind of route, the background checking that I would do. Yeah, if asking people to reveal past sins is haram, then it's also haram for businesses to drug screen candidates for job positions, as that will cause them to expose a hidden sin. Yeah, there's a parallel there. What should a Muslim who wants to get married in the West do in order to protect himself and his wealth? Go with the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and marry the one who is religious, a woman who is religious and pious, has taqwa. That's the best way to preserve yourself and your wealth, because she'll fear Allah the most. She'll fear Allah, and then you can share, like, this is what Islam says, and she'll fear Allah and do the right thing. That's like the best protection. If you think that there's going to be like prenups, maybe if you have a good lawyer and you can figure out a way to create a prenuptial agreement, some states it might be more beneficial for you as opposed to others. You can try to get a prenuptial agreement. You can stipulate things in that contract. You can stipulate things in the nikah to protect, you know, to make sure that, okay, if there is conflict, then we arbitrate. But it's a very state specific, like different states will have different laws. So do research for your specific state and look at both the Islamic side and the civil side. Like the civil courts also apply and they will affect your marriage or potentially affect your marriage. So consult with legal professional in your state, especially if you have a lot of wealth. If you have a lot of wealth that you want to preserve, definitely do that due diligence. Could you kindly clarify until what age women have more right to custody of the children than the men? Well, there are different factors. If the child is nursing, obviously, then it needs to be with the mother. But is there like a set age cutoff? I don't know. I don't know if there's a set age cutoff. There's also the issue of if there's a divorce and she remarries, your children typically go back to the father. The children go back to you because she's remarried, but there could be exceptions to that. But off the top of my head, I don't know all the rules and regulations. Mahar is an order of Allah. However, how do you respond to the argument that paying mahar is like paying for sexual activity and this is similar to prostitution? What is the wisdom of mahar? Like, why? It's a gift. So anytime you give a gift, like if you give a gift, then it's similar to a bribe. Like, why not? Like you're looking at one similar thing between the two cases and therefore they're the same. Like, this is a bad analogy. Your qiyas is not valid. Similarly, like, okay, when you bribe someone, you're giving them gifts. So don't give gifts to your parents. Don't give gifts to your teachers, your friends. Don't give them gifts because you're bribing them. You're basically trying to get favors out of them, for example. Just because there's something in common, that doesn't mean make him the same thing. Like, and I'm not saying that you have this kind of argument. It's a lot of libtards that have this kind of point against traditional marriage. Let's see. Assalamu alaikum, brother. I linked via donation a funny vid of a TikToker day refuting a Christian. Okay, I'll try to find that, inshaAllah. Jazakallah khair for your donation. I have saved myself for marriage even though I had many chances to do zina, and I want my wife to be sane, but unfortunately I see a lot of Muslim women indulge in zina and lying at time of marriage. Well, hopefully you don't literally see them indulge in zina, but in terms of immodest behavior and like mixing and touching and kissing and whatever with the opposite sex, unfortunately, yeah, some of these Muslim women fall into that. It's a shame, but continue to do what you're doing. Continue to make dua to Allah, and Allah will reward you with a pious wife who is also fearful of Allah, like you are, inshaAllah. Or you'll get the reward of everything in the akhirah. What do you think about people with Asperger's syndrome more likely to be atheists, and the fact that most Enlightenment philosophers had Asperger's? Yeah, that's a fact that people have noted. Watch Genius of Islam episode 2. We talk about it, actually. Not specifically Asperger's, but this kind of phenomenon. Let's see. Feminism is maybe the greatest issue in the Ummah. What saddens me is many men as a response go to the other extreme, kind of like Khawarij and Murjia. I don't know what the extreme is. Like, feminism is a kind of problem that is fundamentally restructuring Muslim society. What's the counterpart to that? Like, I don't know what the counterpart to that is. So if you can't find me a counterpart, then the danger is with feminism primarily. Yeah, you can have men who get red pill rage and they say stupid things, like some idiots online. Yeah, red pill morons, in the sense that they just take things too far. But it's like unhinged people online, like keyboard warriors. Those keyboard warriors aren't determining policies. Like, those keyboard warriors aren't behind colonialism or behind these multi-million-dollar NGOs that are trying to restructure Muslim society. Like, they're just idiots. They're like stupid kids. How does that compare with the massive feminist liberal project? It's not comparable. How do imams not get affected by the West in fiqh? By sticking to what came before the ascendance and the power of the West. Stick to opinions that are found in the and are well represented in the pre-modern tradition. Jazakallah khair, Andros, for your super chat. Always appreciate Andros. He's a very generous brother, mashallah. Assalamu alaikum, Daniel. I sent an email to you a while back and never heard back. I'm sorry, brother. Maybe try emailing me again. I receive hundreds of emails, so I'll miss some of them. Some of them I just won't have time to respond, but it's nothing personal. I apologize for that. What do I think about people who go to civil court for a divorce in California? Who's going to civil court? If it's you, that's not a good idea. But if you're being forced, then you have no choice. You'll have to deal with it. That's the cost of living in the West. And if you go to a Muslim country, most of them, you'll face the same thing, unfortunately. How can we establish khilafah while residing in the West? We establish it by continuing to advocate for it and continuing to raise the Muslim consciousness, so that Muslims are organizing for it and are trying to establish it in the Muslim world. And we call non-Muslims to Islam. That's the first step. We invite them to Islam, and we present Islam in a way that makes sense to them and is rational. And that's how more non-Muslims will accept Islam. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe there will be mass conversion to Islam in the future in the West. Allah can make that the case. So Let's be optimistic. Brother Bilal, Jazakallah khair. Love you for the sake of Allah. May Allah love you, brother. This question from Richard is interesting, but I don't know what it's referring to, and I don't want to read it on stream, but I appreciate the super chat. It's about the Groypers. The Groypers and the black question. I don't know exactly what the black question is, but watch my conversation with Owen Benjamin. Maybe that will address your issue. And then Forfas, may Allah reward you for your work in spreading awareness. Wa iyyakum. Thank you, brother. Okay, so that is our show. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, make sure to like and subscribe, leave your comment, share with friends and family, any friends and family who don't know about the laws of divorce in Islam. Traditionally, if they're interested in reform, share this with them, educate your family members and your friends, educate your community, and look out for the full documentation where everything, all the citations will be in a PDF, and we will send that to you. So subscribe to our newsletter so that when that comes out in the next couple of months, you will get it, inshaAllah, and you'll be able to access it. That's in our newsletter. Look in the description for the link to sign up to the newsletter, the email newsletter. Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. Very long stream. As you can see, I'm burnt out, but it was great. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one, inshaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.